Hey guys, can everybody hear me?
You're sounding good, David.
All right, thanks. Hello everyone. Here's COVID-19 executive orders. We're holding this meeting virtually. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. We will call roll calls for all, both for attendance and also for all votes. Excuse me for a second, guys. Sorry. Great. Thanks a lot. Yes. Yes. Okay, great. Okay, great. Thanks so much. All right, great. Thanks. You'll get everything. Sorry, that's the problem of working from home. So, can everybody hear me?
You're
Am I
sounding good.
muted?
You are.
Thanks. Sorry about that. That's one of the problems of working from home. So, as I was saying, we will take all votes by roll call, and in a minute we will actually call the roll. When we do that, even if we call you by name, please restate your name and organization for the purposes of the record. As it says here, if you're a member of the MPO, please state that you're an MPO member also when you state your name and affiliation. So to participate in the discussion, you can raise your hand, as everybody I hope knows. Down at the bottom of the screen, if you click on participate, all the participants in the meeting, there is at the bottom of that in the right-hand corner a raise your hand button. When you press that button, it will show a blue hand, and Matt and I will make sure that we call on you. So Matt, can you put the agenda up? I think we're ready to go. Matt?
Yep. Is the agenda not showing?
Nope. What's showing is the virtual meeting guidelines, at least on my screen. There we
Okay.
go. Thank you, Matt.
All right, no problem. I don't know why there was a delay. Sorry about that. And I also
I am David Moeller. I represent Secretary Pollock here. Matt, can you, I think Jonathan Church is going to actually call the roll, right, Jonathan?
he is indeed. So I will unmute him. You're good to go, Jonathan.
Okay, thank you.
As
Good
Jonathan
morning,
calls-
everybody.
Hold on a second, Jonathan. As Jonathan calls
Yep.
your name, Matt will unmute you. You will then say your name and your affiliation and the fact that you're an MPO member, and then you'll be remuted for the next person. Go ahead, Jonathan. I'm sorry.
And Jonathan, I'm sorry if I can just jump in here. When your affiliation is called, if you could please raise your hand, make my life a lot easier. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Anybody, Mass DOT Highway Division?
Mass DOT Highway Division, MPO member.
Just so I'm clear, is that Mr. Romano?
That's correct.
Thank you. The we'll move on to the next one, MBTA.
Hi.
Sam, if you're there.
Yep, I was just unmuted. Samantha Silverberg, MBTA, MPO board member.
Thank you. Mass,
So again, I think people might not have heard Matt Archer. When Jonathan calls your affiliation, if you could hit your raise hand button, it will move you to the top of the list. So then Jonathan can easily find you to unmute you. So is Massport here? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, Jonathan, go on to the next one.
okay. MAPC, thank you, Eric. MBTA Advisory Board,
Good morning, Brian Kane, MBTA Advisory Board staff, MPO board member.
thank you. RTAC, Regional Transportation Advisory Council,
Leonard Diggins
Lynn, raise
Advisory Council.
Thank-
Leonard Diggins
Thank you,
Advisory Council.
okay, great, thank you. City of Boston,
So Jim Fitzgerald, raise your hand so we can move you to the top of the list and unmute you.
I think I'm unmuted now, thanks. Jim Fitzgerald with PPDA representing City of Boston,
Okay,
MPO member.
thank you. Can you next unmute? Can you unmute Tom Katzis next, please?
Hello, Mr.
State your
Chair.
name. Yep, state your name,
Mr. Chair,
Tom.
could I get this is Tom Katzis. Mr. Chair, I'm requesting some assistance. My hookup isn't working. I'm not getting any audio out of my phone connection with this meeting. Maybe somebody could help me.
Okay, somebody will try to help you. For the record though, Tom, can you state your name and your affiliation?
Tom Katzis, City of Boston, representing Mayor Walsh.
Thank you.
okay. All right,
Go ahead, Jonathan.
City of Everett,
Jay Monte, representing Mayor DiMaria, City of Everett.
thank you. City of Newton,
Presenting Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller, City of Newton.
thank you, David. Town of Arlington,
Daniel Amstutz, Town of Arlington, at-large town representing Select Board Chair Diane Mahan and MPO Towns, MPO Board Member.
okay, thank you. Town of Lexington, okay.
Okay, Richard Canale. Richard Canale, Town of Lexington, representing Doug Lucente for today.
Thank you, Richard. We'll move on to the subregions, Inner Core, Somerville,
representing the City of Somerville, Inner Core, and Mayor Joe Curtatone.
could you repeat your name, please? You broke up with your name.
That was
Tom
Bent,
Bent, thank
boy.
you. Magic Acton,
Austin Saganowitz, Town of Acton, MPO member representing Magic Subregion.
thank you. Metro West, Framingham,
Staff Director, Representative Mayor Spicer Framingham, MPO member.
Okay, North Shore Beverly.
Aaron Clausen representing Mayor Cahill and the North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly, MPO member.
Thank you. North Suburban Woburn. Excuse me, Woburn.
Cassidy representing Mayor Scott Galvin and
Thank you. South Shore Rockland. Okay, doesn't appear to be here. Swap Medway.
This is Glenn Trindade, Selectman, Town of Medway, representing SWAP and an MPO member.
Okay. And last but not least, Trick Norwood.
Representing the town of North.
Great, thank you. That completes the roll call.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Again, so just let me remind people, when we're calling the roll, when you hear your name, please hit the raise hand button. That will move you to the top of the list so that Matt Archer and Jonathan Church can quickly find you and unmute you. Thanks. So the next item on the agenda is Executive Director's Report. Taken. Oh, I'm sorry, the chair's report, but I don't have one. Executive Director's Report, taken.
David, I just did want to say John Bouchard, I believe, is here to say his name for the record.
Yeah, John Bouchard, MassDOT Highway Division, board member.
Thanks, John.
And
So, chair's
Tom
report, I don't have. Okay.
Sorry, Tom
go
O'Rourke
ahead.
is also here.
Tom
So
O'Rourke,
then-
Turk Sub-Region, MPO member.
All right, so then Steve Olenoff is not participating as a board member. He's just a member of the public. He is the alternate, but since Tom is here, just for the record, Steve introduced himself appropriately as an MPO member, but he's actually not today. Chair's report, I don't have one. Is there an executive director's report taken?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I'll just say a few things about our meeting today. I wanted to say welcome to our second virtual MPO meeting. I do believe the last one went very well. You'll notice we have upgraded our Zoom membership so that we can have up to 500 participants. So hopefully this will go smoothly. I do apologize if I'm choppy. I'm getting a notice that my internet connection is unstable, so I'll do the best I can. We will also be following a similar roll call for voting, so please pay attention to being able to raise your hand and don't mute yourself. Let the host mute you, please. So today, in addition to discussing revised scenarios for our upcoming 21 to 25 tip, you will be voting out an amendment to the 2020 to 2024 tip for 21-day public comment today. So this is an amendment that will address the changes in cost and readiness for the current 2020 to 24 tip. So we're talking about them together because they are linked, but I just want to make sure it's clear what you're voting on today, and say that we also really appreciate how engaged proponents have been, even in this virtual setting. I will have a number of written comments to read again after the public comment period. I do know that there continues to be questions and concerns about certain projects being moved out. So I just wanted to preface Matt's presentation with two quick things. One is that while the board may certainly vote how you choose, as MPO staff, we typically don't feel comfortable recommending that a project stay in its current year if MassDOT doesn't believe it will be ready. And so this is typically reflected in how we have set up this scenario. And that's whether the issue with readiness lies on the proponent side or the MassDOT side. Also this year, because there are such significant cost increases for so many projects, some of the projects in the later years are proposed to move out due to fiscal limitations in the original programming year, rather than necessarily readiness issues. So we have some tougher decisions to make this round. Related to all of this, you will also be voting on an amendment to the Long Range Transportation Plan, or LRTP. And this is going to provide consistency with the 2020 to 24 TIP amendment because it needs to include projects that have cost increases. That means that they are nearing or exceeding the $20 million threshold that you all voted to establish in the LRTP. And then finally, in terms of amendments, you'll be voting out an amendment to the current FY 2020 UPWP to incorporate the strategic planning initiative for CTPS, the staff to the Boston MPO, which I've spoken to the MPO about a few months ago. So the chair for that committee will report on that. The other topic item for today is that Andrew Clark in our Transit Analysis and Planning Group will be giving you an update on the Successful Shuttles program. And then finally, I want to say a few things about upcoming meetings. We will have a UPWP committee meeting only on April 2nd, and we'll start at 10 when the MPO meeting would have started. But we will not have an MPO meeting, just a UPWP committee meeting, and it will go from 10, I block off 90 minutes. And then our next MPO meetings, as a reminder, will be held on April 16th and April 30th. And just as an additional reminder, Sandy is still looking for information on transportation-related studies that towns are conducting between October 1st, 2020 and September 30th, 2021 to note in the UPWP. So please reach out to him if you have any of those. And that, Mr. Chair, is it.
Thanks, Tegan. Are there any questions for Tegan from the members? If so, use the raise your hand function. Seeing none. Next up is do you want to take public comment from people online first, or do you want to give us a synopsis of the public comments we've received and other processes? Which way would you like to do it, guys?
I am ambivalent. I assume we might follow the same procedure as last time, and I can adapt what I read off as the written comments. Okay. But if folks would prefer me to read those first so other folks feel you don't have to speak, that's fine.
Yeah, why don't you go first since you're currently unmuted, and then people from the public who want to speak, you can start raising your hands now to get in the queue, and then we will call on you. Go ahead, Tegan. Why don't you cover what you've received?
Bear with me. I'm just pulling it up. Okay. All right. So again, similar to last time, I have a summary of the written comments that were submitted to the MPO staff prior to today's meeting. The full letters have been compiled and posted on the MPO meeting calendar under today's date, so you can read the entire letters if you would like. Again, this is just a summary. You, again, as David mentioned, you're welcome to raise your hand and speak additionally to any of the summaries I read or provide additional comments after I finish reading them. We have a few less than last time, so hopefully it won't take quite as long. Beginning with the City of Framingham, Mayor Spicer writes in support of two projects. Mayor Spicer writes to request that the reconstruction of Union Avenue remain programmed in 2021, as this project is moving forward and has been the recipient of significant financial support from the city for utility and stormwater work already. Additionally, Mayor Spicer writes to advocate for the city's traffic signal installation project at Edgell Road and Central Street. She notes that the city has been working with the legislature to resolve the Article 97 issues in the project area, and that the work will be completed in time to allow the project to be programmed in 2023. That concludes Framingham. Next, the town of Hingham had two letters submitted in support of the intersection improvements at Route 3A Summer Street Rotary Project, which is currently programmed in 2024. First, Thomas Mayo, the town administrator, writes that the design is proceeding ahead of schedule, putting the project on track for advertisement earlier than 2024. For this reason, and because of the project's importance for multimodal safety along a key corridor, the town requests that the project not be pushed to a later programming year. Hingham also notes that the cost increase for this project is largely due to a change in the pavement reconstruction strategy being used, as well as due to rising unit costs. The town highlights their robust support for the project, including their full commitment to funding its design. And Mr. Mayo also notes past and ongoing support for the project, highlighting the 2018 pilot project along this corridor, as well as continued work of the Route 3A resident task force to inform the project's design. Second, State Representative Joan Machino writes to echo the comments made by the town administrator, and she urges the MPO to maintain project funding for this project in 2024, noting the importance of the project for safety and connectivity for both Hingham and the South Shore region. Next is from the town of Hull. The town manager, Phil Lemnius, writes in support of the reconstruction of Atlantic Avenue, currently programmed in 2022. The town notes that they are currently working with MassDOT to resolve comments on the 100% design plans, which were submitted in March 2019. The town is also currently advancing right-of-way acquisition and environmental permitting to keep the project on track. The letter notes the project's important for safety and resiliency and highlights how the complete streets design features included in the project align well with the goals of the MPO. Next, Mark Ryan, who is the Director of Public Works for the town of Norwood, writes in support of the town's intersection improvements project at Route 1 and University Ave, currently programmed in 2022. Mr. Ryan requests that this project remain funded in 2022 as it provides key operational and safety enhancements to the region. He notes that the project was the subject of a study by CTPS, MPO staff in 1996, and that the town has fully supported the project since then as it corrects the existing deficiencies that have impacted Norwood commuters for years. And then from the town of Swampscott, Suzanne Wright, who's a member of the Swampscott School Committee, writes to advocate for the town's rail trail project, which is currently under consideration for programming in 2025. She notes that the committee fully supports the rail trail as a key connection to the town's elementary and middle schools because it provides safe off-street access to both campuses. And Ms. Wright also highlights the improvements the project will make to enhance multimodal access to the town's commuter rail station. Next, I think we just have about three or four more. From the city of Woburn, Mayor Scott Galvin writes in support of the intersection project at Route 3 and Bedford Road, currently under consideration for programming in 2025. Mayor Galvin highlights the importance of this project for safety and congestion in the region and details the recent work done by the town of Burlington to acquire the right-of-way needed for the project to proceed. Next, Austin Zaganowitz, MPO member from the town of Acton, writes in support of the Kelly's Corner project, currently programmed in 2022. He thanks the MPO for its support of the project and notes that the town will be voting at the upcoming spring town meeting to acquire the needed right-of-way for the project. The town anticipates submitting their 100% design plans by July of this year. Next, second to last, we have David Nugian, the Director of Public Works for the town of Bedford, who writes in support of the Minuteman Bikeway Extension Project, which is currently programmed in the TIP in 2022. The town notes that the project remains a very high priority and expresses a desire to see this project retain its funding in 2022. The town notes that they have diligently worked on this project for 15 years and that this project is on track for a November 2021 construction advertisement date. And then finally, from the town of Bellingham, James Cutler writes in support of the rehabilitation of Route 126. The project is currently programmed in 2022, and the town requests to be considered for funding in 2021 if there's funding available in the TIP to move the project forward. And that, Mr. Chair, concludes my summary of the written comments.
Thank you, Tegan. I should also note for the record that I heard today from the mayor of Salem, Mayor Driscoll. She had hoped to be on today's meeting, but other issues have gotten in the way as to be expected. She talked to me about how important Boston Street is. She hopes that it can be programmed in 2025. It's an entrance corridor to the city that connects the city of Salem to the city of Peabody. It's in, to use her words, the road is a disaster, and it definitely needs to be fixed, including to have some complete street treatments, and it provides access to the recently constructed and opened senior center. So that's my only comment I got from someone else who I didn't have a chance to get to the members. Now, members of the public, if you would like to speak at this time, please use your raise hand button and we will call on you. Seeing none, if you want to speak during the meeting, please let us know by raising your hand, and again, we will call on you.
Mr. Chair, there do appear to be a number of raised hands.
Yep, I got some. They just popped up.
Okay.
So before we do that, let me note for the record that I see Hayes Morrison from Massport is here. I don't think she actually had the chance to note her attendance, but for the record, she is here. First person who has raised their hand is Kian Ho. please unmute.
Hi.
You are.
Hi, Dave.
For the
Can
record,
everyone
please-
hear me?
Yep. For the record, please state your name.
Sure. This is Ken Ho with Beta Group. We are the engineering consultant for the town of Westwood. And I know Todd Thornton, the public works director from Westwood, is also on the line. And so as the consultant, I just wanted to update the MPO on the design aspect of the project. We just completed our comment resolution for the 25%. So we've been working with the Boston folks and the district folks as well. And so I think while the project is not being programmed, the goal is to finish the design aspect of the project and, you know, get it at least completed and ready for a future, you know, MPO program. So I think as we all know, Todd is probably going to mention, you know, a little of the background regarding this project. Route 109, the corridor, is a major regional connector for communities such as Dover, Walpole, Medfield, Millis, Medway, and it carries a little over 20,000 cars per day. And there are a lot of operational problems along this corridor daily. And it's a major truck route, depending on the time of the day. The average percentage range from 6 to 8%. As we all know, Trusca Concrete Company, it's located in Millis, use this as a major route, a connector to 128. So I think the town for years, 10 years or more, have tried everything from signal timing adjustment to trying to piecemeal upgrading the traffic equipment, lane markings, signage. And if it's anything else, they have received a lot of concern from neighborhoods surrounding this road because there are a lot of cut-through traffic through the neighborhood that we have to address because of the congestion on 109. So I think this is a very, very important to 128. So I think I'm just gonna let Todd, you know, fill in regarding some of the, you know, problems that he has faced from residents and businesses along Route 109. I think I'm just gonna stop.
Ken, are there questions for Ken from the members? Seeing none, why don't we go ahead and take Todd Thornton next? He's got his hand up and he's going to talk on the same project.
All right, can you guys, everybody hear me?
We can hear you, Todd. Go ahead.
All right, thank you again for having us. Thank you again for having us. This is Todd Thornton, Director of Public Works from the town of Westwood. Ken, thank you very much and great job explaining and giving a brief background. I know I was on last week, and again, you know, to echo some of Ken's thoughts, the town has invested close to $500,000 worth of funding in the past to try to mitigate the issues that Route 109 and the congestion that we're experiencing has caused with the abutting neighbors and abutting neighborhoods. That all said, I mean, I think we can all agree that this is a valid project. It's affordable. It seems to be a flexible enough project that if there is some funding available, I think it's a great opportunity to take advantage of that flexibility level. My concern is having this project not programmed, and under consideration, I looked at the list for FY 2025. As we all know, technology is always evolving. So, you know, we're committing money. We're at a certain point of design now. We hope to be very aggressive in completing that design. If this thing isn't programmed until 2025 and or beyond, where does that put our current design? So, I mean, that's my gut feeling. I'd like to see a little more aggressive approach to a project that really has a tremendous amount of validity and a tremendous amount of flexibility.
Thank you, Mr. Corchin. Are there members' questions or comments to Mr.? Seeing none. Next up from the public, Tom Lamar.
Good morning.
You're unmuted. Good morning. For the record, state your name and your affiliation if you'd like to.
Tom Lamar. I'm the chair of the Somerville Bicycle Advisory Committee, which is a group of Somerville residents that advises the city on how to make biking safer and more accessible for people of all ages and abilities. Speaking on the funding for the McGrath Boulevard project, and specifically the possibility of allocating funding for this as part of the major infrastructure programming. Somerville's policies are in many ways both oriented towards the McGrath Boulevard project, in some ways depending on it and in some ways complementing it. Somerville's streetscape projects often contribute to intersections that are becoming much safer, but depend on significant improvements to McGrath itself to be fully usable. For example, last year, Somerville made a major commitment to add protected bike lanes and bus lanes to Broadway leading up to the intersection with McGrath. Somerville is currently designing improvements to Highland Ave, which will hopefully include safe connections to McGrath. There is a major project underway on Somerville Ave, which will lead to high quality protected bike lanes right up to the intersection with McGrath. But in order for all of these projects to provide a safe network of all ages and all abilities bike facilities, we need the grounding McGrath Boulevard project to be completed as soon as possible. In addition, Somerville is committed to expanding multimodal transportation as much as possible, going to great efforts to have a revised zoning code and other land use policies that promote better multimodal transportation, more walking, biking, and transit, and less dependency on automobiles. I'm asking that the MPO consider dedicating some or all funding from the major infrastructure program in order to advance the engineering of the McGrath Boulevard project as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lamar. Any questions from the members? Seeing none, next up is Valerie Greenberg of the town of Wilmington. State your name and affiliation for the record, please.
Good morning, Valerie Gingrich, Director of Planning and Conservation for the town of Wilmington. Considering the funding constraints that the board has to rectify, we acknowledge that moving a project up in schedule, even if it's flagged as recommended to be moved up, may not be possible. I'd just like to reiterate the interconnectedness of 3 projects that are currently programmed on the tip: the new Boston Street Bridge in Woburn and the 2 Wilmington projects, Route 38, which is Main Street, and the Lowell Woburn intersection. These projects will impact each other. The opening of the new Boston Street Bridge will result in additional traffic through the Lowell Woburn intersection, which is programmed to be upgraded after the construction of the bridge. The Route 38 project and the Lowell Woburn intersection project serve as detours for each other. And all we ask is that the MPO carefully consider the sequencing of these 3 projects, and we will continue to move forward with the design for Lowell Woburn Street intersection. We plan to be 100% designed by spring 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Greenberg. Any questions from the members? Seeing none, the next up is Philip's iPhone, so please introduce yourself and any affiliation for the record, please.
Sure. My name is Phil Amniotes. I'm the town manager from Hull, and I want to thank everybody. How are you? Thank everybody for the opportunity to address the group. And we also appreciate greatly the staff's work on setting up this platform in order to keep all these projects progressing. The town has one project before you, which is the Atlantic Ave project. We're at 100% design, and Mass DOT is and our engineers are working to resolve kind of any issues that are associated with the design. This project is one of really only 3 access ways in and out of Hull. The town just completed a $7 million seawall rehabilitation project, which helped protect the roadway. And we are now also completing about $2 million worth of underground sewer work along the roadway. So all of the underground utilities, and the gas company has also been doing its work. So the underground utilities are in great shape. We have our own light department, so all of the work that would be associated with electric and communication transfers and relocations and so forth can go very quickly because we do have our own light department. And this has been a project that, has been in the works for close to 10 years now, I think, or longer. And really just want to say that we appreciate the fact and the diligence that you guys are doing, and we would respectfully request that the project remain programmed for the FY 2022 tip.
Thank you, Phil. Any questions from the members? Seeing none, we have 3 people from Sudbury, so I'm going to call on them in order. So first will be Beth Meier, then we'll take Lynn Simon, and then we'll take Jennifer Roberts because that's the order they are on my screen. So can you unmute Beth Meier, please? Beth, you're unmuted when you're ready.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the members of the board. I appreciate the opportunity to speak again today. My name is Beth Meier. I am the environmental planner in the town of Sudbury in the Planning and Community Development Office. I don't want to reiterate a lot of the emphasis and advocacy for the project, the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail project in Sudbury Phase 2D that you heard last week, but I did want to let everyone know that we are very pleased that we have heard from Mass DOT that they have completed their preparation of comments in response to our 25% submission, and now we are working diligently to respond to those comments and advance towards the design public hearing for the project. We are interested in hearing from Mass DOT after they've had some time to consider how they'll be proceeding with scheduling design public hearings given the current crisis that we're navigating, and we'll look forward to working with them to schedule that in the near future. I appreciate the opportunity to comment and will be available for comments should any arise during the discussion. And we certainly hope that it is going to be a favorable vote today to keep the project on 2022 programming. Again, thank you very much for all that's happening under the circumstances to advance this.
Thank you, Beth. Any questions from the members? Seeing none, let's unmute Lynn Simon, please. He's still muted on my screen. Is he unmuted yet?
That should be better.
Yep. Can you introduce yourself for the record, please?
Yes. Good morning. My name is Lynn Simon, formerly a member of the Sudbury Board of Selectmen. I won't go into it in detail because this was covered in large part last week. And Beth Meier, our environmental planner, covered the topics very well today. First, I'd like to thank all members of the MPO, MPO staff, in particular Matt Genova, and Mass DOT staff for all their work. The town officials are working closely with the design consultant and Mass DOT personnel to respond to their comments for the 25% design and enable it to be moved forward so that the design public hearing can be held. The town of Sudbury has long been a strong supporter of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, and you've heard this before, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak again, and thank you for all your work and to keep the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail on the tip for fiscal year 2022. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. Any questions from the members? Seeing none, let's go ahead and unmute Jennifer Roberts, who's also from Sudbury.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, again, like my colleagues, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak today. My name is Jennifer Roberts. I'm a member of the Sudbury Board of Selectmen. And again, I just wanted to highlight the importance of this project to Sudbury for so many reasons, including environmentally clean and safe mobility, health, and wellness. But this is not only an important project to Sudbury. We are just a link on a chain of the many communities that are so lucky to be a part of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, including Lowell, Chelmsford, Westford, Carlisle, Acton, Concord, hopefully very soon Sudbury, and then hopefully one day Framingham. And we are so looking forward to being a part of this amazing regional resource. As we've expressed before, there's a long history of support for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail in Sudbury. Many town meeting votes in favor over the course of the past decade, and we've allocated money as well to do the design for the project. So just want to emphasize again, we on our part are committed to working as quickly as possible to do what we need to do in order to keep this project funded in 2022. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts. Any questions from the members? Seeing none. Brendan Callahan, City of Peabody.
Hi there, Brendan Callahan, Assistant Director of Planning, City of Peabody. I'm the lead planner on PBD's Bikeway or Independence Greenway projects. I spoke a lot last week, so I don't want to go too much into or rehash what I mentioned last week. But we do have one program that is a project that's a program for FY24. Again, we are on schedule. Everything has been moving along, again, on schedule. And then we have a new project considered for FY25, which is, looking at the connection between our existing bike paths and we're looking to construct a bridge over Route 1 connecting all three trailheads there. One of the points I made last week was the ability of the city to secure design funding moving forward. As I mentioned, we are Community Preservation Act community. We had a preliminary grant fund proposal meeting with CPA members this week. And it was a very encouraging meeting, and we were recommended to proceed with a funding request to, we have the 25% design funding for the FY24 project. We are going to be now requesting funding for the 75% design to keep that project on schedule. And they are also encouraging us to submit the funding request for the 25% design phase for the new FY25 project. So again, the PBD has the ability to secure the funding. We have the support of the CPA, and these projects are the CPAs, as they like to call them, crown jewels. They're their flagship project for the community, and again, just want to reiterate that the city does have the ability to secure the design funding and keep these projects on schedule and meet the timeline for the TIP schedule. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan. Any questions from the members? Seeing none. Next is David Del Torrio from Hopkinton.
Yes, hello, thank you. I just wanted to follow up from last week.
Can you
last meeting?
Can you state your name? Can you state your name and affiliation for the record, please? Sorry about
correct, sorry. It's David Del Torrio. I'm a town engineer in Hopkinton. And again, I just wanted to follow up from the last meeting. Am I all set, Dave? Sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry. You can go now. Sorry to interrupt.
All right. It's okay. Again, I just wanted to thank MassDOT, the MPO staff, for all their hard work. The town has been recommending or requesting additional funding. I believe as part of the 100% submission in MassDOT review, MassDOT supports an increase in the TIP funding. On behalf of Hopkinton, I just would like to thank MassDOT and again MPO staff, and hope MPO will support it, the increase. And just quickly, the town is committed to funding, just over $9 million on this project. It's close to a 1-to-1 match for the project. So we just wanted to let the MPO staff know that, the town is committed to this project, and we hope the increase gets voted on. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Del Torrio. Any questions from the members? Seeing none. Next up is Ben Cares from Chelsea.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for hosting this online in the wake of everything that's been going on. The City of Chelsea just wants to express thanks for scoring our project, collaborating with us. We have indeed found a partnership with Mass DOT to fund our downtown Broadway project. As I represent the Planning and Development Department moving forward, if the program expands and funds become more available in the future, we certainly hope that as we move through cost estimations and sort of fleshing out the project, that we might collaborate with you in the future. But again, we just wanted to thank you for scoring us so highly. The Downtown Broadway project is extremely important for our residents. And it touches on a lot of the sort of earmarks of what we're trying to do as transportation planners and staff. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Cares? Seeing none, Brad Rawson, City of Somerville. State your name and affiliation, Brad, for the record, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak once again. We appreciate the board work and attention that the board and all of our related allies and advocates have been placing on this important process. Thanks to the staff for the hard work and board members for real thoughtful commentary these past several meetings. As a reminder, Mr. Chairman, Somerville represents the inner court sub-region, and we're proud of our advocacy for our municipalities. For program year 2025, we are pleased to see Chelsea in with a state-funded partnership. So to echo Ben's comments, thank you to the DOT team and the City of Chelsea for advancing that important intercore project. We want to repeat our previous advocacy over the last month for projects in Newton and Milton. And we also want to applaud over the last 7 days the approach that the staff and board have taken about major infrastructure, major investment program for key LRTP projects such as Lynn and Somerville's McGrath Boulevard project. Definitely looking forward to today's board discussion. Happy to answer any questions as we move forward. We've articulated the mobility benefits of the McGrath Boulevard project, which is a regional project with co-proponency by the City of Somerville and Mass DOT. But just as we all focus on the economic catastrophe that's unfolding around us, I thought it was important to remind board members about the City of Somerville's commitment to equitable, high-density, transit-oriented, smart growth in and around the McGrath Boulevard corridor. Since we started this process with you years ago, the City of Somerville has adopted an entirely new zoning ordinance. Our council voted that ordinance into law in December 2019, and now you see by right entitlements available for the private sector all around the McGrath corridor. Something like 5+ million square feet of new development is easily available. We've reduced artificial barriers and really tried to emphasize shovel-ready projects. It was important a month ago, Mr. Chairman. It's even more important now as the economy collapses around us. And we also know evidence about induced demand ability, particularly when you overbuild parking facilities as So I just want to let folks know that as we talk about some of the smart growth agenda, we've also placed very stringent caps on the outlay of new parking around smart growth sites. And developers sometimes squawk, frankly, but they'll thank us later because we're saving them money up front. And the regional mobility system depends on communities like Somerville artificially constraining the amount of parking supply, because that obviously pushes mobility towards more sustainable modes of travel, transit, walking, and biking. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I appreciate everybody's time, and thanks for letting me to participate here, and I'll be around all meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, Brad. Any questions for Brad from the members? Seeing none, does anybody else from the public have a comment they'd like to make at this time? Okay, if you want to comment during the meeting, please raise your hand and we will try to call on you. So the next item on the agenda is committee chairs reports. Are there any? If so, please raise your hand so we can unmute you. Seeing none. Next up is the Regional Transportation Advisory Council report. Can you unmute Lynn, please?
Hello. So
hi, Lynn. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing fine. Thank you. The Advisory Council is going to have our next meeting on the 8th. We're going to try and do it the same way that MPO is having this meeting. We are hopeful, based on how well this has been going, that it will go well. The 3C committee met again yesterday. We did it on fairly short notice. I asked to have that based on last week's MPO meeting, and I was very happy to the way that Matt Archer accommodated us, but more so how Matt Genova spent a long time talking with us and helping us to understand what's going on. And so I may not comment a lot later on in this meeting, but I feel much more prepared to vote appropriately based on that meeting. So thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you, Lynn. Any questions for Lynn from the members? Seeing none. First action item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of February 27th. Can I get a motion and a second by MPO members raising their hands, please? Is there a motion? Daniel Amstutz from the town of Arlington makes the motion. Jay Monty from the city of Everett seconds it. Can you please call the roll, Jonathan?
David Mueller,
Yes.
John Romano,
Can you unmute John, please? Thank you. John?
yes. John Bouchard,
Yes.
Samantha Silverberg,
We're good.
Samantha?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hayes Morrison, Hayes Morrison,
Okay, Jonathan, go to the next one.
okay. Eric Barassa,
Yes.
I believe I heard a yes there.
Yes.
Okay. Brian Kane, okay, I'll go to the next one. Leonard Diggins,
Yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Still muted. Oh, yes.
Tom Kadzis, or is it just one for Boston?
No, it's supposed to be two, but I think Tom still may be having trouble with his equipment.
Okay, I'll come back to him.
Yeah, I mean, yes. I don't know what the problem is.
Okay, thank
Can
you,
you hear
Tom.
me?
Yes.
Yep, we can, Tom. Thank you.
Great.
Jay Monty,
Yes.
David Kozis,
Yes.
Daniel Amstutz,
You need to unmute him, please.
Yes, it's Dan. Yes.
Richard Canale,
Yes.
Tom Bent, Tom Bent.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Austin Saganowitz,
Abstain.
same meaning yes.
I wasn't there, so I have to abstain.
Oh, abstain, I'm sorry. Thatcher Keyser,
Yes.
Aaron Clausen,
I abstain.
Tina Cassidy, Tina Cassidy?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Glenn Trindade?
Yes.
Tom O'Rourke?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Chair, should we go back to Hayes Morrison and Brian Kane?
Yeah, see if you can unmute them and have them. Okay, I
Hayes
see
Mor-
Brian. Brian, you're up.
Kane,
Brian's
yes.
unmuted. That's Brian Kane, Jonathan. He's unmuted.
Brian
Okay, I
Kane,
think
yes.
I heard
Unmute Hayes.
yes. Thank you.
Yes, he said yes.
Hayes Morrison?
All right, that's good, Brian. So the motion carries. Thank you very much. That motion passes. Tegan, do you have a question or a comment you'd like to make? Tegan's got her hand up. Tegan?
Yeah, I do. Just for voting procedures, because it's not guaranteed that we can see everyone on film. If I know it takes some time, but if everybody could, one, remember do not mute yourself, because if you mute yourself, you have to prove being unmuted. And then also when you ask them, when you call their name, can you please just very quickly repeat your name and then say yes, no, abstain, just so that in case we can't see you, we know that it is you.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the federal fiscal year 2021 to 2025 Transportation Improvement Program. Matt?
Yes, thank you, Sarah, and hello, everyone. Appreciate your time today. Looking forward to what I hope will be a great discussion. Before I dive in, I do want to flag just one additional public comment that we received this morning. From the City of Newton, Nicole Friedman writes in support of funding for Newton's project on Route 30. That's the reconstruction of Commonwealth Avenue. It's a project that's currently under consideration for programming in 2025. So the city notes that this project is sort of currently tied together with a complementary project in Weston, just further west on the Route 30 corridor. And the letter also notes that in between those two segments of the project, the Newton segment and the Weston segment, Mass DOT is undergoing some work sort of in that middle section. She notes that it's essential that all these projects are coordinated to continue sort of the bike and pedestrian elements through that entire corridor. And so to that end, the city is requesting funding in 2025 for this project. So I just wanted to make sure that that's included as part of today's discussion. Just a sec, pull up notes here. Okay, so today, my sort of main discussion here will focus on the final program scenario for the federal fiscal years 2021 through 25 TIP. Before I begin, I do want to ask that everyone hold their questions and comments until the end of the presentation. So at that time, you may use the raise hand function as we've been doing today. If you'd like to speak, and then the chair will call your name and we will unmute you so you can participate in the We also want to thank all the project proponents who have submitted written comments or who are attending the meeting today to weigh in with their thoughts. We really, really appreciate your continued engagement throughout the TIP process. And just know that your feedback and engagement here certainly makes the process clearer and much more enjoyable and engaging for us as staff and for the board. So we really appreciate you all being a part of this. Sorry, there might be a slight lag on the slides. Oh, sorry. I don't know what's going on with these slides. getting a slow motion preview of my entire presentation. No. For Matt Archer, I don't know if you want to control the slides on your end. It seems like I'm having a 10 or 15-second delay between when I do something and when the slide moves, and I'm able to advance the slideshow right now. So I don't know if it works smoother if you control it.
Yeah, I can absolutely do that. Just if you could just indicate next slide, we should be good.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, let's go back to the title slide and then.
So topics for discussion is on my screen. There may be a significant amount of lag right now.
Okay. Yeah, it's pulled up here, so I think we we should be set to go. So this is the ground that larger tip development timeline. We'll outline some goals for today's conversation, and then I will move into a discussion of the draft programming scenario that we've posted for today's meeting, before getting into some next steps and a discussion of options. And I'll just flag for you all that I'm going to walk through the scenario sort of year by year. During the discussion, we'll come back to the sort of outset of that, starting with 2020, and then we will walk through year by year sort of the decisions that we need to make. Next slide, please.
I think we're just going to have to deal with this delay. If you can tell me 15 seconds before you need to advance the slide, that would be great. But I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah, if we can go to the, just go ahead and. Okay, so this is the tip development timeline for this year. You can see in bold that we are here on March 26th, which is our final opportunity to discuss program areas for this tip development cycle. So by the end of today's meeting, we will need to make sort of any and all decisions as it regards to programming this year. Moving into April, by the end of April, we will have a draft tip document for MPO review that we will then subject for public review. That will go off the 21-day public comment period. That puts us on track to endorse the final tip by the end of May. Yeah, if we can go ahead. Sorry, I should have given you an earlier heads up on the slide. Yeah, so moving into the goals for today on the next slide. This is good. The lag is giving me a time for a coffee break here. So goals for today are twofold. One, we need to resolve the cost overrun and schedule issues that we talked about last week that sort of permeate the 2020 through 2024 TIP programming years. And again, the decision that we make for that 5-year period will become TIP Amendment 3, which will be voted out later in today's meeting for a 21-day public comment period. So I'll come back to that and what that looks like later in today's conversation. The changes in 2020 through 2024 will also lay the groundwork for LRTP Amendment 1. That's an amendment to our long-range transportation plan, Destination 20. So my colleague Ann McGann will be going over what those changes are later in today's conversation as well. Finally, once we resolve those issues, we will move into a conversation on how we want to allocate our new funding in fiscal year 2025. Right. Yeah, if we can go ahead and move to the next slide. So just to go ahead and start this conversation, so today we will only be discussing one draft program scenario. So again, I'll walk through the scenario year by year, highlighting the approach that we've taken in each year, and then I'll note some of the trade-offs that are being made to arrive at this draft scenario. So again, my intention is to go through the entire presentation and then come back to 2020 and start the discussion there. So before we get to the details, I do want to direct you to our website, ctps.org. And if you navigate to our meeting calendar under today's date, you'll see an attachment that outlines the scenario that we'll be discussing today. So I encourage you all, if you haven't already pulled it up, to have it accessible, as that's what we'll be referencing throughout the conversation. A quick the color coding in that scenario. Projects highlighted in yellow saw cost increases or cost changes of more than $500,000. Projects in red text were flagged as high risk during MassDOT's readiness days for not meeting their targeted advertisement days. And projects in purple were recommended by MassDOT at readiness days to move into a later programming year due to readiness concerns. This additional purple highlighting in the fiscal year columns. So projects that have purple highlighting in their fiscal year columns, but not in their project name, are projects that are recommended to be moved into a later year due to financial constraints and not due to project readiness issues. So that's something we'll talk about in more detail here shortly. And then finally, the blue highlighting, which you'll see mostly towards the bottom of the tables. This is on the second and third pages. Scenario is where new funding is being recommended to be allocated to different projects. So I do also want to flag for you that at the bottom of page 3 of the scenario, you'll see a summary table that shows sort of how all of the changes and adjustments made throughout the TIP add up by fiscal year, so 2020 through 2025. And then to the right of that table, you'll also see a small chart that outlines the scenario relates to our funding goals by project type outlined in the long-range transportation plan. So beginning with federal fiscal year 2020, the scenario 2020 accommodates the cost increases for the reconstruction of Route 1A in Walpole, the reconstruction of Route 126 in Ashland, and the signal and intersection improvements project on Route 135. In addition, this scenario moves Everett's Ferry Street project into 2021 due to project readiness concerns, as this project is not currently on track to meet its advertisement date during the 2020 fiscal year, which, as a reminder, does end at the end of September of 2020. So in order to 2021 funding for the Green Line extension is brought forward into 2020. This allows the proposed scenario to utilize all of the funding available to the MPO in fiscal year 2020. As far as difficult trade-offs that are faced in this year, there really aren't any, as this scenario allows us to fully program all projects that are ready for advertisement in 2020, while also accommodating the cost increase and moving out projects that are not ready. Moving now into 2021. Includes the previously mentioned changes from 2020, including the programming of and the decrease in 2021 funds for the Green Line extension. From that baseline, this scenario accommodates cost increases for the New Boston Street Bridge project in Woburn and the Route 1A intersection project in Norwood. The scenario also retains Framingham's Union Avenue project in its current programming year in 2021, as the city has made tangible progress in weeks to keep this project on track, including the submission of the 75% design plans in late February of this year. This scenario moves both Boylston Street in Boston and Linfield Street in Lynn into 2022, as these projects were determined by MassDOT to not be ready for advertisement in 2021. In order to accommodate all of these adjustments, roughly $6.3 million in 2021 funding for Sumner Tunnel is moved into 2022. Is allowed because this project already has an advanced construction schedule using statewide funds that extends into 2022, and the total project cost being over $100 million exceeds the federal threshold of $25 million for splitting costs over multiple construction cycles, or seasons rather. So this scenario also repurposes $1 million in previously allocated community program funds, as these funds were left over after covering the cost of the selected projects for this program in 2021. So as a reminder, my colleague Sandy Johnston went over these projects with you back on February 27th. At that meeting, Sandy described the 6 projects that were proposed for funding, using a total of $742,000 in funding in fiscal year 2021. Since that time, the city of Somerville has begun working with the MBTA to further scope transit signal priority project in Davis Square, which is one of the project's recommended funding. At the request of the MBTA, Somerville's project has expanded slightly in scope to include extra equipment, bringing this total project cost from $140,000 to $220,000. So in addition to accommodating this addition of funding in 2021 to the Somerville project, this scenario retains an additional $170,000 in Community Connections Program funds in the event of any other cost adjustments projects programmed in this bucket of funds. If these funds aren't needed for these projects, then these funds can also be used during the next TIP cycle to cover cost adjustments for any other TIP projects programmed in 2021. So on the trade-offs front, again, there aren't a lot of sort of significant trade-offs here, as this scenario, again, allows us to fully fund all projects that are ready to be programmed in 2021 while moving out those that are not ready. Moving now into 2022. So the funding picture starts to get a little bit tighter in 2022, as our new baseline includes both Boylston Street and Linfield Street, which again were reprogrammed from 2021, as well as an additional $6.3 million for Sumner Tunnel that was again moved from. So from that baseline, this approach fully accommodates the cost increases for projects in 2022, including for the Upper Broadway project in Chelsea, the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail in Sudbury, and the Atlantic Avenue project in Hull, as well as the Route 126 project in Bellingham. In order to accommodate the $13 million cost increase for Mount Auburn Street in Watertown, roughly $18 million in funding for this project is moved from 2022 into 2023, as this project now exceeds the $25 million federal threshold for splitting a project cost over multiple funding years. In this scenario, both Bedford and Framingham are moved out 1 year into 2023. This is due to both project readiness concerns expressed by MassDOT, as well as to the financial constraints that we face in 2022 due to cost increases. In 2022, funding for Rutherford Avenue is decreased by about $13.3 million. This is really the main trade-off in this year, as this funding is being reallocated from Rutherford Avenue to cover cost increases for other projects. So in order to move either Bedford or Framingham back into 2022, funding for Rutherford Avenue would need to be further decreased, or another project would have to be moved out into a later year. So those are some of the sort of difficult choices that we have to make in 2022. Moving to 2023. So in 2023, both Wrentham and Wilmington had cost increases this year, which led to these two projects being moved out into 2023 in this scenario due to financial constraints. This scenario also covers the cost increases for both the Dedham and Winthrop projects and keeps them in their current programming year. These projects are a little bit easier to keep in their current year because they're both smaller projects than the Wrentham and Wilmington projects. In this scenario, Ipswich is also moved out 1 year into 2024 due to both readiness concerns and again due to financial constraints in 2023. So the trade-off here is really that existing funding levels for Rutherford Avenue are maintained, but in order to do that, projects that are on track in terms of their readiness, again, those are the Wrentham and Wilmington projects, have to be moved into a later year. So again, in order to move either of those projects back to 2023, funding for Rutherford Avenue would have to be decreased, or other projects would have to be pushed out into a later year, as there is no more funding available in 2023. Moving now to 2024. So in 2024, cost increases are accommodated for both the Hingham and Milford projects. But again, in order to do that, these projects are both moved out 1 year into 2025. A slight cost increase is also covered for the Independence Greenway project in Peabody, which we heard a little bit more about at last week's MPO meeting. Here you'll also see that the pedestrian beacon project in Framingham is removed from the TIP. So as we've talked about in prior meetings, this project was deemed by MassDOT as non-viable as it's currently designed. And so it was recommended to be removed from the TIP entirely, which is what we've done here. So the trade-offs for 2024 are again that ready projects in both Hingham and Milford are moved into a later year in order to preserve some funding for Rutherford Avenue in 2024. That sort of level of preserved funding for Rutherford Avenue is much lower than it was originally, as $28 million in funding for Rutherford Avenue that was originally allocated in 2024 has now moved into later years in order to keep the other projects that you see in 2024 programmed in that year. So this scenario doesn't move either of the two projects into earlier years that are currently flagged as being eligible to do so by MassDOT. So those are the Littleton and Wilmington projects. Though that option is still available to you to move those projects into earlier years, should you want to take that approach. And again, we heard from Wilmington earlier in today's public comment period, the desire to move that intersection project into an earlier year to better coordinate that project with other changes and projects going on in the same area. So moving now into 2025. So 2025 is where our new funding is available this year for making fresh programming decisions. So in this scenario, the proposal fully funds both the Community Connections Program and the Transit Modernization Program in full at $2 million and $5.5 million respectively. Again, these were the funding amounts that were laid out for these programs in the most recent long-range transportation plan, which we endorsed back in August of last year. So this scenario also programs significant funding for Rutherford Avenue, allocating $44 million in 2025 to this project and putting us on track to finish funding for this project in 2026, which would leave us with about $32 million of project costs left to cover in 2026. So again, this project is a 5-year construction project and 2025 is year 4. So that means all funding needs to be allocated for this project by the end of 2026, which we'll allocate during next year's TIP cycle. So based on feedback received from the board last week, this scenario programs the highest scoring projects in the Complete Streets, Bicycle and Pedestrian, and Intersection Improvements programs. Those projects are the Woburn Common project, the Independence Greenway project in Peabody, and the Route 3 and Bedford Road project in Burlington and Woburn. Again, MassDOT has proposed to fund Chelsea's project on Lower Broadway in their statewide programming, as we heard earlier from Ben Cares and Chelsea. So we are not funding that project in this year's regional target program, but again, it is being funded in this TIP cycle, just using statewide funds. In 2025, you'll also see a line item to allocate $12 million towards a new major infrastructure project. This is also based on last week's discussion, where significant interest was shown by the board in exploring funding options for new long-range transportation plan projects in 2025. So there are 3 projects to choose from here, and a key decision that we'll need to make today is whether we would like to allocate these funds to one of these projects or allocate these funds to another project in 2025. And I should note that the funding level, the $12 million funding level, is sort of flexible. But any changes we make in that level would impact the amount of funding that we would allocate to either other projects or to our existing commitment to Rutherford Avenue in 2025. And again, the 3 projects that are eligible for funding under this major infrastructure umbrella are Western Avenue in Lynn, McGrath Boulevard in Somerville, and the Route 9 and Route 27 bridge project in Natick. So as a reminder, if we choose not to fund any of these projects in this TIP cycle, that leaves us with 4 years of TIP funding left, 2026 through 2029, to cover these 3 projects that are currently unprogrammed, if we aim to meet the goals that we set out in the long-range transportation plan last year. So again, this is something we'll come back to later in the discussion, but I just want to reiterate that in the long-range plan, we did set the goal of funding all of these projects in full by the end of 2029. So the real trade-off in this scenario is that due to cost increases, our existing funding and our existing funding to Rutherford Avenue, we are very limited in how many other new projects we can program in this fiscal year. That's why you'll see only 3 other new projects, in addition to any decisions about major infrastructure, are programmed in 2025. So we can move forward one more slide. I just want to talk briefly about next steps. So as a reminder, later today, we still have to vote to release TIP Amendment 3. And that amendment, which we'll come back to later in the discussion, will contain the decisions we make for programming in 2020 through 2024. We'll also vote to release today TIP Amendment 1 for public review, which my colleague Ann McGann will go over later today. In late April, we will bring a draft TIP back to this body for review, and then hopefully have a vote to release it for public review by the end of April. At that late April meeting, we also vote to endorse the LRTP and TIP amendments that we release for public comment later today. That puts us again on track to endorse our final TIP by the end of May. With that, I think that's all the ground that I wanted to cover in my slides. I guess.
Thank you, Matt. You done?
Yeah, if we could just take the slideshow maybe back to 2020 and start the discussion there. But yeah, I will defer to the chair on how I'd like to proceed from there.
Okay, and just let me ask you a question. Do you have, or can you put up the actual spreadsheet that shows the TIP amendment, or the 21 through 25 TIP, I guess is what we're actually on, or the 20 through 25? I don't need you to put it up right now. I just need you to have access to it in case we want to put it up. Is that possible?
Yeah, I'll defer to
that is possible. I can have that at hand in just a few.
Okay, great. Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
All right, so John Bouchard, I think you have a late breaking announcement on one of our projects. Is that correct? Can you call on John Bouchard, please? John, I think
Yes,
your mic's open now.
thank you. I just wanted to comment on the Everett Ferry Street project, which is moving, which is proposed to be shifted from 2020 to 2021. We received, MassDOT received a 75% submittal on that project within the last 2 weeks. However, in the new normal that we're in, we have not been able to fully add that into our project info system. And as such, I was reviewing the documents this week in preparation for today, and the cost for Everett has increased to approximately $26 to $29 million. So what's shown on this current scenario by Matt, and I apologize for the late information, but what's shown here is not 100% accurate. However, the costs haven't been verified at this point. Some are costs for potentially non-federal aid reimbursable costs, or they need special approval for certain items. So I bring it to the chair's attention for discussion, and just so people are aware of it, that that the cost that's currently shown is not 100% correct at this point.
And may be off by a factor of $10 million.
It may be off by a factor of $10 million, yes.
Maybe.
Maybe.
So now now we will take comments from the members. I see Dan has his hand up already, so can you unmute Dan, please?
Sorry, can we just take the slides back to 2020? Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'll my comment. Well, two questions, and I guess I'll probably defer to Jay about the question about Ferry Street. But I was just noticing that for 2020, the cost for Ferry Street during the last scenario, or from last week, was like 19 million, and now it's showing as 16 million. And now, obviously, we're hearing something totally different. But also, the cost for, I think, Hopkinton was showing $8 million last week, and now it's showing $11 million. So I'm just trying to understand where all these sort of last-minute changes are coming in. And then the second question is about Rutherford Avenue in the 2025 year. I think Matt was saying that there's another, is there another 30 million beyond the 44 million showing in 2025? Because the way I was looking at it was that 2025, I was confused at whether the 44 million in 2025 was all of the remaining committed amount for Rutherford, or whether there's an additional behind that we're not even showing here that would need to be programmed in 2026. Thank you.
Okay, so I will try to answer one, and Matt Genova will help me, and then I will try to answer the other, and John Bouchard will help me. So on the last question first, yes, there is an additional year of funding for Rutherford Avenue needed beyond that which is programmed in the TIP at this time. So I don't have the numbers in front of me, but yes. So I believe the cost of Rutherford Avenue is approximately $146 million, and I believe the MPO TIP is going to program approximately 115. So that leaves you somewhere in the neighborhood of $31 million that you're committing to in FY26. When that time comes next year, it'll be in the TIP as the final payment. And Matt, jump in here if I say, Matt, that's generally speaking correct, right?
Yeah, that's correct. We do have that one other year. It's going to be, somewhere in the $30 to $35 million neighborhood.
All right, thank you. And then the second two issues on Ferry Street, I believe last week, I think we're carrying a number of 16 as the original cost, and last week we had increased it to 19. And as John has just recently mentioned just now, the cost has gone up based on the most recent design submittal to roughly 25 to 26. On Hopkinton, it's again, cost increases have have gone up on the project. John, do you want to speak about those increases and what they're for in a little more detail? Can you?
Yes, I can, Mr. Chairman. For the knowing that we were having this discussion this week, I had staff meet with the design consultant and the town of Hopkinton the end of last week and then the first part of this week to go through. And, you know, just from a timing perspective, when we received the most recent, let's say the previous design submission to the last MPO meeting for Hopkinton, there were costs that were not deemed or that were potentially federal aid eligible, but had not been fully vetted with the overall project. And there were no additional federal funds available through the MPO. And now that they've gone through that effort and there were additional funds available, my design team has, or my project managers have gone through that with the town and with the designer and identified those costs that would be federal aid eligible if there were funds available. And that's the new scenario that you have in this spreadsheet that was prepared by Matt and MPO staff.
Thank you, John. Jay Monty, City of Everett. Jay, say your name for the record, please, Jay.
Jay Monty, City of Everett. So I just wanted to address the Ferry Street project, and I think Rich Benevento is on here as well, so I may ask him to speak when I'm finished here. So just going back, that original cost, I think, was 16 million, assumed a mill and overlay on the road. Moving forward a couple of years, as we got to 25%, at Mass request, that was converted to a full depth pavement. So that was the initial major jump. This last one, I believe, and I'll ask Chris to speak here, but that was the discovery of a drain line, major city drain underneath the street that has actually collapsed. When it was cambered, it was found to be collapsed. So that's a big portion of the additional costs, as is, I think, some reconstruction of the street lighting. Possibly the non-participating piece of this, but if we could ask Rich to speak up here, that would be helpful too.
Rich Benevento, can you unmute Rich Benevento? Rich, I think you're unmuted. Rich Benevento, I can't. You're unmuted, but I can't hear you. So try again.
I think he's trying to chat.
Okay, Rich, I just heard you.
See.
All right, we'll come back to Rich, try to figure out that connection. We won't take any votes till we get Rich's connection set up. Next up is Leonard Diggins. Hey, Lynn.
Thank you. So in light of the previous comment about on the Hopkinton project where it's up by 4 million based on the possible availability of funds, to what extent can we say that we'll keep the project but not increase its funding?
All right, so so you can't fund part of a project. I mean, theoretically, I guess, if the MPO said they weren't willing to fund the full costs, we would then, as MassDOT, go to the town and tell the town, the MPO is not funding your entire project. Are there costs you can cover? And if not, is there a way to scope down your project? Now, I'm not sure there's a way to scope down any given project, and I'm also not sure that that's something you want to do this late in the fiscal year when you're trying to advertise a project this year. But theoretically, that is what would happen. If the MPO does not fund what are the project costs as identified by the town and MassDOT, then we would have to go to the town and see if there's any other solution. If there's one, say, either don't fund the project or do, but you can't fund half a project.
Right. Well, the reason I asked though is because it seemed like they were saying that, well, we discovered parts of the project that would be available for federal funding if that funding were available. So it doesn't seem like it's a go or no go based on whether they get the additional $4 million, unless I'm misunderstanding things.
John Bouchard, you're unmuted, so can you help Lynn with this, or me with this?
Yes, I can. What I had stated, and I may have misstated it a little bit, is that when the prior submittal was received by my team and distributed for review, there were costs. The project was and I don't have the cost directly in front of me at this point, but there were costs that needed to be assessed to make sure that they were eligible for federal funding consistent with MassDOT policies, procedures, and with FHWA approval. However, if the project was over the programmed amount, so we said that those costs, until the 100% review was conducted, we could not determine if those costs were eligible for federal funds, so they were not put forward to the MPO. Now we've determined that those costs are eligible for federal funding, and the town has been advocating for additional funds for the project for the last several meetings. It was just that at the time of our review, and I just want to comment one moment on Everett being the same thing. We received a submittal. We're validating that submittal and reviewing it internally, and the cost that is currently in the MPO is different than the current submittal for Everett, and that's exactly what happened with Hopkinton. We had a submittal in. We were conducting our review. The cost was above the programmed amount, but we didn't feel comfortable at the initial phase, at that initial review, that the costs were eligible until we had gone through the full design package. Now that we've done that, we've determined, or we've assessed that that cost is federal aid eligible, consistent with MassDOT policies, procedures, and what other communities have been able to utilize in the past. So it isn't that, oh, there's money available, let's ask for it now. The town has been asking for that money. It was just that when we first received the submittal, my design team had to go through all the pieces, make sure how it fit together and what was federal aid eligible before coming to the MPO with the town and saying we need additional funds.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for explaining
that
again.
Makes sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
I apologize if I misrepresented it a little bit differently in my first discussion. I apologize.
No, it was not your fault at all. It was my misunderstanding. So I appreciate you explaining again. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Next up is Austin. State your name and for the record, will you please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Austin Saganowitz. Just a question for John regarding the Bedford project. Speaking with some of the town officials, they contend the easement acquisitions won't take as long as MassDOT believes, and the project remains on schedule from their perspective and a high priority for FY22. Can you speak a little bit more on that project? And I guess from a broader perspective, how exactly do we deal with objections from communities from a readiness standpoint?
So John, why don't you handle the first part, and I'll try to handle the second part, and Matt can help me if I misspeak.
Okay. Readiness that we assess based on available information, whether a project can be completed within the time frame that's needed. And if we feel that it will be difficult for the community or permitting or right-of-way acquisition to be completed versus that time frame, then we make a recommendation. My staff makes a recommendation that, look, we don't think this can be done. Now on the Bedford, I think, did you mean the Minuteman Trail?
Yes.
Okay. Just to be clear, we feel that making a 2021 timeframe is going to be difficult to achieve with some of the challenges on the project. and my team has recommended a 2022 for the programming. I think is, and I'm not able to reopen the spreadsheet that Matt sent me. I think I have too many things open on my laptop in front of me. But what I would commit with the town of Bedford through the District 4 office in Arlington, who works more closely with the community, is that we would program the project in the first quarter of 2022, meaning a November or December advertising schedule, such that construction would still commence in the spring of 22, whereas a late summer, end of federal fiscal year 21, current advertising, or what had been previously programmed in August or early September advertising, would not dictate a start any sooner than the spring of 22. So the first quarter of 22 fiscal year would still constitute a spring of 22 construction start, and there would be no appreciable change in the construction phase of the Minuteman Trail if it could be completed within that time frame.
Thanks, John. Now, as to readiness, every year MassDOT, all of the MassDOT divisions that deal with project development meet to discuss TIP projects and whether we believe they will be ready for the year programmed. We meet with each MPO staff and discuss the projects and discuss the reasons for why we don't believe they're ready. It is our strong recommendation that MPOs not include projects in a year we don't believe they will be ready to go, but it is always an MPO decision, and we do not have any veto authority over any of that decision. And if the MPO decides that they want to believe the town and not believe MassDOT, the MPO is at their discretion. Staff, however, because I am the chair and I sort of try to direct what happens here, at least to begin, always draws the amendment as if the readiness recommendations of MassDOT should be considered as the first attempt at doing a TIP amendment. But the MPO is always available to override those recommendations. We would strongly suggest you don't, and it might cause us to vote against the TIP, but nonetheless, it is your decision to make. I just want to make clear, it's not staff's fault that they took all our readiness decisions. That's what they're supposed to do to begin the discussion.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome, thank you. Bill Conroy, just state your name and affiliation for the record, Bill.
Hi, Bill Conroy, representing Millwall, City of Boston. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, MPO members and others. Just talking here about Rutherford Avenue. We were fortunate enough yesterday to get the construction time duration estimate for Rutherford Avenue, which brings a little bit of a light to what we're carrying under the TIP for the fiscal years. Just let me go over them quickly. For FY 2022, the proposed is $10,369,725. The need is $9,476,115. That project, we see that not starting till full construction, probably till June or May of that current year. That's why the decrease of $1 million. FY 2023, the proposed is $34,324,554. The need for that would be $43,064,652. FY 2024, proposed $25,418,157. The need is $30,992,716. In FY 2025, currently we're carrying $44,047,396. This is going to be a 5-year project. So the need right now is only $22,092,440, but that would mean that we'd have to carry in FY 26 additional $9,518,821. All those figures I just put forth to the members all amount to what we're currently carrying as $114,159,832. So some of that helps maybe some projects, while it may not help others. But I'll just turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Bill. Next up is Rich Benevento. Go ahead, Rich. Okay, I still can't hear Rich. Can anybody else?
No, nothing.
All right, so Rich, why don't you hang up and try to call back in and see, try to get back in and see what happens. Next up is Tom Bent, City of Somerville.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not sure if this part of the discussion is time to bring up the 12 million that's basically that Matt has in the final programming scenario for the major infrastructure projects. As you know, we're looking to get Matt McGrath Highway moving forward. From what I've talked to of the MassDOT project, that we're at 20% design about right now. And as I've been told, we need to get on the tip to get the rest of the money to complete the design. So we'd be looking to put, and I think he was saying that it would probably be another 5 or 6 million to get for the design. So whatever would be appropriate to put in 25 for the McGrath project, we would be looking to try to do.
All right, thanks, Tom. Are there other members who want to make a comment at this time? Eric Barassa. I knew you wouldn't let me down. Wait, Eric, can you try again, Eric? I couldn't hear you.
Okay, hold on. I'm putting in my earphones. Sorry.
Thanks.
Okay, is that better? Can folks hear me?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. My question is, and I apologize if I missed this, is from Matt. Matt, the 12 million that you have in 2025, is the intention that we would program one of the 3 LRTP projects, or are you also thinking that that could just be like a placeholder for, the inevitable project increases and, just sort of a buffer? Did you have any thoughts about that or what you were recommending?
Sure. So the $12 million that's held there, which again is subject to change on the actual dollar figure, depending on what this board decides to do in 2025 to do programming. So based on last week's discussion, it seemed like there was a general interest in seeing options for funding a long-range plan project in 2025, which is why the $12 million is sort of held as an umbrella figure over those 3 projects, as opposed to being allocated to another project or multiple projects that are for funding 2025. So that decision is really up to this board, and whether or not you all feel strongly about how you want to allocate that money. Of course, you are welcome to not allocate the money. But I guess my recommendation based on, again, what Tom Bent just said about McGrath is that if we are thinking that we want to program a long-range plan project in 2025, my recommendation would be to make that decision this cycle and not to hold that money for potential long-range plan projects in a future cycle, just because without knowing which project is going to be funded, it's difficult for those projects to move forward with design. And so if we're going to allocate any money to a new long-range plan project here, then I suggest we definitely allocate that. Or if we choose not to fund a plan project, we could always, reserve that money for cost increases or anything like that and come back to the plan question in next year's TIP cycle. But that would mean that none of the long-range plan projects would meaningfully advance in project design in the next year.
Thank you.
Let's see if Rich Benevento is now somewhere we can hear him. Rich? Rich? All right, let's keep trying. Rich, keep trying. Leonard Diggins.
I'm Diggins, Advisory Council. Right, so what would be the minimum that we could give to the McGrath project in order to get it to complete its design?
So, to be clear, we're not talking about, as far as I know, we're not talking about funding design with TIP money. There's a sense that unless a project is in the TIP, it won't get designed by MassDOT. So I can say that regardless of who Tom Bent spoke to, number one, a project is never at 20% design. That, you know what? It's at pre-25 or it's at 25, number one. Number two, I don't know who gave you the estimate of what it would cost, and I don't know why they would bother giving you that estimate since we're not looking to the MPO to fund it. I can tell people that this project does not have to be programmed in FY25 for MassDOT to continue its design. City of Somerville should never have been told that. That's not true. The MPO can still program funds for it if they want, but they should program construction funding, and then they should program what they believe the first year cost of construction funding is, not some token amount to make MassDOT pay attention and start the process.
Okay, well, thanks for that. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Lynn. No worries. Next up is Brian Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian Kane, MBTA Advisory Board. Just wanted to go on record as supporting the $2 million in community projects each year that the staff have included. I think that's a great use of funds. Transit modernization funding in 2025 at $5.5 million, I think, is a great utilization of MPO funds. Transit modernization is clearly something that we all support, and I think creating a pot of money in the out years to begin doing that is a very positive use of funds. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Brian. Next up is a phone number. So I don't have a name. So it is a phone number ending in 3401. And
It's
once we
Rich.
unmute you- Hey, Rich, great. Say your name for the record.
Oh my God, this has been like one of those nightmare dreams where you're running down the hall and you can't get to the end. Oh my gosh.
Say your name for the record,
Okay. I hope everyone's doing well. I've been enjoying the meeting this morning. So just a little bit of history about Ferry Street, and then we can talk a little bit about, how it got to where it is. So obviously PRC approved back in 2014, 25 submitted in November of 16, DPH in August of 18. So the project had some history, and it's a mega project, as we all know. Over the last year or so, as we were getting ready to submit 75s, we've developed some other project issues that have come up. One of which was a concrete slab under the majority of Ferry Street. Back in the day, that road was built with a concrete slab and trolley tracks under it, and so we know that was going to be an issue. So we ended up doing some additional underground subsurface exploration just to get an idea of the extent of that. So we know that has had a significant impact on the cost. The other thing too is, and Jay mentioned that earlier too, was lighting, street lighting on the project. Again, it's a pretty substantial project. I think street lighting alone is probably in the order of $3 million all by itself. So there's just a bunch of different aspects of the project that have resonated over the design process. So we've tried to do as much as we can to value engineer a lot of this stuff down. And then some items, for example, is a water main replacement. Obviously, that's non-participating. But we've also been talking to the city about other ways that we can reduce the cost of the project. Some of the things that the city may be participating in, and some of the things that just need to be in the project just simply because of what's out there. Jay had mentioned drainage issues. I mentioned that concrete slab. And then again, just the sheer size of the project. And when we talk about Ferry Street, which goes from Revere Beach Parkway all the way to the Malden City line, we're also talking about Elm Street, which goes from Ferry Street to the Revere City line. So there's another aspect of that project as well. So, I think that's one of the things as we move forward as, MPO, MassDOT, and the consultant community is, trying to get a better idea of what these costs are right from the get-go, right from the PNF and PIF. because oftentimes by the time these projects actually get to fruition, it's several years later, and numbers change. I mean, we know last year just on complete streets projects, those small projects were coming in 30 to 40% above what normal pricing is. So, and we're seeing that as well. We've actually tried to make a conscious effort of making sure the unit prices that we're using, and again, we use Mass DOT, standard unit prices, but also looking at those to make sure that they are a little bit more realistic given the current times. So I can answer any questions if folks have questions too. So.
Thanks, Rich. And just for the record, can you say your first and last name for the record?
Oh, sorry. Rich Benevento, World Tech Engineering, working with the City of Everett on the Ferry Street project.
Thanks, Rich. Stay tuned because if we have questions, we may call on you. Daniel?
Hi, thanks, Dan, Town of Arlington. At this point, I have a hard time utilizing this scenario at this point with the new information about Ferry Street. And I just, as an MPO member, I find it very frustrating that we're making humongous cost increases for projects that are in FY20. I don't understand why we couldn't have known about some of this ahead of time, even last week or the week before. I hope I'm speaking for other people. I hope that I don't. Yeah, so it's very difficult to use the scenario given that we know it would need to be programmed in LRTP, as it would be over $20 million. So I just wanted to state that, and I'll say that I think on the major infrastructure project in the 2025 year, I think I would be in favor of having, I don't know how much money exactly, but putting some money on McGrath Boulevard, given that it is a long-standing project. It's the most costly of the major infrastructure projects that we are looking at for that time band. And so it's going to need, I don't know what we're predicting as the construction time frame for it, but it seems like spreading out that money if we can. The other two projects will not need as far a spread of funds over those years. So those are my comments. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Aaron Clausen.
Thank you, Chair. This is Aaron Clausen, City of Beverly. I appreciate the clarification on the McGrath Boulevard project. I just had a question on the other two major infrastructure projects that are shown on the spreadsheet. Are those maybe stop projects, or are those City of Lynn, Town of Natick projects?
So my understanding is that the Lynn, yeah. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Cool, thank you. Is that the Lynn project is city-led, whereas the Natick project, I believe, at least from the design led by MassDOT. Yeah, and the Natick project is something that I know the bridge department at MassDOT is also taking a look at, sort of, actively on the design front.
So then in that case, for the Natick project, is it safe to presume that that design is continuing as well?
Yes.
Information on sort of what the present day status is of that. You know that the design we had this year is an updated design, and so I believe that that project is still advancing, but I would defer to John.
Actually, next up to speak anyway. You want to answer?
Okay. Yes, the Natick project is still in the design phase. The original, we had an initial design that the community was not in favor of because we started looking at the bridge. The bridge is Route 27 over Route 9, and there is a I don't like to really call it an interchange, but there are exits off of Route 9 that go on to 27 that are affected by the bridge. In our initial look at doing the bridge, we needed to also look at the interchange or the intersections that are there. And we worked with the community, and initially we didn't have a lot of support. We differently went back to the community with our preliminary design and went to a public informational meeting to get support. And we are moving forward with the next phase of a design on that project.
Thank you, John. Tom Bent? Can you unmute Tom, please?
Oh. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay,
Yeah, we can hear you, Tom.
Maybe there's a misunderstanding here, David, but in the and 26, as per discussions that we've had with you and with the secretary, as long as there's a commitment that the design is going to start up again and continue. So that's kind of where we are. We're just trying to figure out how we can get this project back on track again, and that's where we are right now.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, did you get the spreadsheet of the 20 to 25 that it can be loaded? Because we have to actually figure something out today to vote a tip amendment out.
Yep, just give me one second to get that shared.
Thanks, guys.
No problem. Okay, are people seeing that?
Not yet. Might, yeah. There it is.
There it is.
Okay. Probably gonna need to zoom in a little bit here.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm open to suggestions on how I want to move through this. And to Daniel's point, I mean, obviously we've had some adjustments going on here relative to what's actually included in the spreadsheet. So, I might just walk through.
Matt, can you take a breath and I'll actually chair the meeting? Thank you.
Oh,
so,
yep. My apologies.
As everybody knows, okay, Ferry Street now costs $25 million. Okay. I, on behalf of MassDOT, apologize for the fact that we are just telling people this today. Some of that is related to the fact that, design schedules don't follow tip schedules. And so 5% design, you review the costs and you adjust the costs. And it is unfortunate and inappropriate that it happened the day before, or I guess the day of the tip meeting. We do apologize. Nonetheless, it cost $25 million. I don't think the city or the designer came in and disputed the costs. So we need to figure out how to fund it at $25 million or decide that it's not a priority of ours for $25 million, which I would not recommend, okay? But we do have to get to a tip amendment that we can release on the street today. So now, Matt, you want to talk about options, or you want to let the MPO discuss what they'd like to do? Now, Matt, how would you like to handle it? Because it is actually your job, and you do it well, Matt.
Thank you, and I apologize for in there. Excited to arrive at a solution.
Don't worry, we just both try to do our own jobs, Matt. But you do a great job at yours. So go ahead.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you laying the foundation for this continued discussion here. So I guess to move forward in the spreadsheet that was sent out, the funding for 2020 can remain as shown here, assuming that everyone is okay with following MassDOT's recommendations and moving So that would leave us in a good place for 2020, unless there are, any further sort of objections or questions or comments on how we approach that.
Okay, so let's pause for a second, Matt. Excellent. Does anybody have any comments or questions they would like to make about FY20 as projected on the screen in front of you? Tom Katzis, I see you have your hand up. I'm not sure it's related to this, but Tom?
Thanks. I might as well make my comment then, Mr. Chair. I was just going to say, for somebody who's been through a number of these votes, these cost increases, at the end of the day, how the MPO has operated has been in for a penny and in for a pound. And I just wanted to show my perspective on that's sort of been the modus operandi of the MPO. I agree with Richard's comments, and I've made them before, about trying to get some sort of design contingency in the future. But I guess what I'm saying is, with the rules that we've been operating under Ferry Street, we would include it in this tip. The complicating factor here, of course, is the timing. But in terms of the principle of it, the MPO has always tried to accommodate the municipality. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Tom. So, members, you see FY20 in front of you. As Matt stated earlier, we do not have to make any changes to FY20 in order to accommodate the changes that will necessarily be made for Ferry Street. Does anybody have any comments on the FY20 list of projects or anything they'd like to ask a question about? Seeing none. Now, so the next issue, and I'll turn it back over to you, Matt, in a second, so be ready. The next issue, obviously, is we had originally recommended, staff had, that we delay Ferry Street by 1 year into FY21. Other cost figure. It's now, roughly speaking, $9 million more than that, 25 million and change probably. So in order to fund that, we have to fund something else at $9 million, find $9 million of room. The cost exceeds $25 million. The MPO does have the authority, if you would like, and assuming it's a 2-year construction project, which I'll have to ask John Bouchard about that after I speak, we could fund it over 2 years, assuming it's a 2-year construction project. John or Rich Benevento or Jay Monty, do any of you know if this is a 1-year project or a 2-year project? Jay Monty's got his hand up. Can you unmute him?
I believe this is at least a 2-year project. Maybe even
Go ahead, Jay.
More. Yeah, I believe this is at least a 2-year project, if not more.
All right, so then John and Rich both also have their hands up. So John? Can you unmute John Bouchard, please? Okay, John.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would expect that it's at least a 2-year project.
Excellent. And Rich, do you have anything more you want to add? Unmute Rich. Rich?
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo John. I'd actually almost say a 3-year project. By the time there's a lot of underground, it's going to be a difficult project just from a traffic management standpoint. So at least 2 years, maybe even 3.
Okay. So that being said, in an attempt to solve this problem, the MPO can spread this cost over 2 years or possibly even 3. And remember, it's a $25 million in change cost, not a 16. So we can, that's just as we're trying to do this, you don't have to find $25 million all in one, or I guess the difference is $9 or $10 million. $9 million all in 1 year. You can spread this cost out and play with it that way. Matt, do you have any suggestions or anything you want to tee up for the members to discuss?
Sure, yeah, and I think you did a really good job outlining the sort of options at play here. So one option would be to leave 2021 as it's currently outlined in this spreadsheet here, which would allow us to cover $16.6 million of Ferry Street in that year. we could then defer, the 8.5 plus million of the rest of the cost into 2022. So that would allow us to have 2021 as is, but then as we get into 2022, we would have to make some further adjustments to funding in order to accommodate that change. I guess the other alternative is to fund, all 25 million in 2021. My understanding is that that is an option because we can fund a project early, but not, even if construction extends longer. Is that correct, Mr. Chair?
Yes. Yes, you can always fund more early, and you can always fund it all in 1 year. You just can't fund it beyond its scheduled time.
Okay. Thank you. So so that alternative would mean that we could fund, let's say, $25 million for Ferry Street in 2021, but that would require us to adjust the advanced construction schedule for the Sumner Tunnel project, which is currently split between 2021 and 2022. So the sort of easiest solution here would be to push the additional 8.5 million roughly from Sumner Tunnel in 21 to Sumner Tunnel in 22. So I think those are probably our two clearest options here.
Okay. So Matt and I could just talk amongst ourselves, but I do need some MPO involvement. So Eric? Thanks, Eric.
This is
You're on, Eric.
Eric Barassa, MAPC. Is there any ability to move up project like the FAM project in 2020?
Matt, did you understand Eric's question? Because I sort of didn't understand his question.
Yeah, I'm in the same.
Matt?
Yeah, sorry,
Project
Eric.
20. You move a project from 2021 into 2020 is like the Framingham project.
But then you would make 2020 out of constraint. If you move something forward into 2020, you've got to move something out to accommodate it.
Could you then move the green lines with it?
Yeah.
Around the
So
can
think
you
I understand.
Can you tell us? Okay. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Matt.
sure. So I think I understand the question is that we could adjust the green line funding, or the proposal is to adjust the green line funding in 2020 to move another project forward. The issue with the green line funding is that the 18,412,068, so that number has already been dispersed to the green line, and so we can't go under that amount for 2020. We can allocate more in 2020, which is what we've shown here. So we would do, my understanding is that we would sort of do a second transfer from highway funds to the T, but we can't sort of undo a transfer that we've already done. And so we can't dip below the $18.4 million currently shown in fiscal 20 for the green line.
Yes. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Dan?
Thank you. So another question. The Framingham, I think it's Union Ave project, which is about a little over 10 million, is shown as purple. Wait, so it's being suggested by MassDOT as it should be moved back, but it's being kept in 2021. Is that right? Is that what I'm seeing?
Yeah. So what happened was after the time we did tip readiness, the community came to the MPO on several different occasions with several different people and talked about how their project wasn't behind schedule and it would be delivered on time. They then got their 75% design in. It was not on its original schedule, but it actually beat its adjusted schedule. And so then, all things being equal, MassDOT and staff had a discussion where MassDOT would not object to keeping this project in 2021.
So I guess I'm just, in terms of figuring out what to do next, I'm really just focusing on those, or thinking about those projects that are flagged as having issues with readiness, as being sort of the candidates that would be the first ones to look at for making some shifts, because it seems like we'd have to move at least one project out or move it or somewhere else in order to accommodate another $9 to $10 million. Thanks.
Yep, thank you. Eric Johnson.
Can you hear me?
Eric?
Yep, can you hear me?
Yep, I can now.
Okay, thank you. No, I just want to clarify. I think the Union Ave was essentially just a misunderstanding. The schedule that the city submitted to MassDOT in January had a week earlier advertisement than the schedule submitted in December. So right now that project is literally ahead of schedule. I think it was based on some misunderstanding, perhaps, of the schedule submitted over the length of this project. But we have done our 75% and we're on track.
Okay. Lynn?
This is Lynn Diggins, Advisory Board. So I would be in favor of, on the Everett project, to take it, fund it all for this year as planned, 16 million, and then split in the difference over the next 2 years, and maybe push some things out, and maybe use that 12 million be from 12 in 2025 as we push things out to kind of absorb maybe some of that.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn. So, Richard Canale.
Yeah, so it seemed
Richard,
like
state your name and
Richard Canale, MPO Towns, Lexington.
Thank
so
you.
I wanted to ensure what I thought I heard Matt say, and he was initially proposing moving funding, the possibility of funding Ferry Street in entirety in 2021 and moving the Sumner Tunnel reconstruction money out to 2022. And if we could make the 2021 whole, then we can worry about where that other 9 million comes in the 2022. So can Matt confirm that's my understanding of what you said? And if that's the case, that would be my preference.
Yes, that is a correct assessment of what I said. I guess maybe I'll just sort of clarify. So we have two options for funding Ferry Street that can leave, basically don't require us to push any projects out of 2021. So if we fund it as it's shown currently at 16.596 million in 2021, then 2021 can stay exactly as is. So that doesn't require the Framingham project to move or any other projects. We would then put the roughly $8.4 million from Ferry Street, that is the additional cost that we need to cover, in 2022. And then we would have to make adjustments from there. The other alternative that doesn't require anything to move around, which is essentially sort of a 6 to 1, half a dozen to the other scenario, is that we can fund all of Everett in 2021 and then move funding from Sumner Tunnel, like some funding, into 2022. So the reason it's sort of 6 to 1, half a dozen to the other is that we know that both projects are going to be in construction for both 2021 and 2022 and potentially further. And so this either funding allocation doesn't require an adjustment in project schedule to either of those two projects or any other projects. at least as they stand in 2021. Does that make
Okay,
sense?
so if I still have the microphone, so my preference would be that I think the Everett project is a Boston MPO project in comparison to the Sumner Tunnel. So I would prefer the option of fully funding Everett in 2021 and moving the equivalent money out of the Sumner Tunnel to 2022. And then once we get to 2022, we can figure where that 9 million comes from.
Okay, thank you, Richie. Dan?
Daniel Amstutz, Town of Arlington. Yes, well, I'll just say first, in terms of those scenarios, what Matt was just talking about, I don't really have a preference with either of them in particular. I think Richard has a preference for keeping all the money in the Everett project for 2021. But one question I was going to ask earlier that may be important into play now is that I recall from last year that there was I believe that there were a few projects, a few rail trail or like shared use path type projects like the PBD project that were picked up by MassDOT through some state trail funding that was, I don't recall the exact source, but I recall that had happened for a few projects last year. And maybe that was later on in the process when we were discussing, maybe it was coming up when MassDOT had their capital funding clearer. But I'm just wondering if there's any possibility that might happen, which would help address at least some of the trail projects, or whether that's not likely.
So MassDOT has released its draft lists of all of our statewide projects. So as of today, there is no room for additional projects on the MassDOT side. It is, as an example, it's one of the reasons the MPO doesn't have to worry about funding the Chelsea project is because MassDOT is going to fund it. But right now, we don't have any room. Now, there is actually a project in another region where we thought we were going to split fund it with the MPO, but the MPO may not fund their portion, in which case it may make $8.5 million roughly of bicycle funding, of bike trail, bike bed funding available. If that's the case, we would have to look statewide to see what our priority is. So I can't tell anybody that we have the money or that we will make the money available to a Boston project, but it is not, it's not unlikely that before the TIP is finalized, we may come and say, hey, we found we took some money from another region who couldn't use it, and we're going to make it available to your region. I just can't say it's going to happen yet because we have to look at the statewide needs and confirm that they don't want that money.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, Dan. David Kozis.
Yes, one thing, because I think I got a little confused with this discussion of the Ferry Street. Are we saying that if we fund it over 3 years instead of over 2 years, that there would be no impact at all in terms of the actual construction? It wouldn't be a longer duration?
Right. So here's what we're saying. We know that Ferry Street is at least a 2-year construction project. There's a sense from the town and their designer that it might actually be a 3-year construction project, and they would know better than we. And we certainly wouldn't say, no, it's 2 years, because we don't know yet. So I think the MPO has the leeway today to program this project over 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. Still, the point is, at some point, you're gonna have to push projects out because there's not $9 million available in the first 3 years to solve the problem in any 1 year or 3 years. John Romano?
I'm not, oh, sorry, I don't know if you can hear me. I'm not sure if the Boylston Street Improvements Project in 2022 can be moved if it was moved out for readiness. But if that could go back to 2021, there's the 8 million and change for 2022 for Ferry Street, and then we could maybe shift around, if we still have to shift around the Sumner Tunnel money, does that help?
Right. So again, much like Eric Barrasa's comment earlier, moving things forward to accommodate money in a later year just causes a problem in the earlier year. It doesn't really solve the problem. It just moves the problem to the earlier year rather than the later year. It is certainly something the MPO can consider, but at some point we've got to get to the place where we decide what is moving out of the TIP or into FY25 to accommodate the $9 million increase to Ferry Street. And once we decide that, okay, Ferry Street's a 3-year project, we can try to play with the cash flows, I guess. So rather than try to do it the way we started, which I thought at the time made sense and would have been the way I'd gone, let's try to talk about what projects would the MPO consider moving out in order to accommodate the $9.
Yeah, maybe to just elaborate on the chair's question here. So our options are really to essentially decrease funding for Rutherford Avenue in an earlier year, and then we would have to find that funding in 2025 or 2026 for Rutherford Avenue. Alternatively, we could push other projects out that potentially are feasibly ready, and just sort of, have a sort of chain reaction effect through the TIP where, perhaps one project in any given year is then pushed further out. But yeah, I mean, something has to give, to the chair's point, in order to accommodate an extra, $9 million.
Okay, so MPO members, is there any suggestion, discussion about what projects should be moved out to accommodate the $9 million? And again, it can come out of one fiscal year, or it can come out of 2 or 3 fiscal years, as long as it adds up to $9 million over the 2021 to 2023 timeframe. That is, again, assuming everybody wants to keep our commitment to Ferry Street, which I'm assuming everybody does. Brian Kane.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Kane, MPO Advisory Board. Just want to get clarification from Matt or from you, Chairman. I see on my my spreadsheet that the Bruce Freeman Rail project in Sudbury that we heard such passionate discussion about is highlighted in red as identified as high risk for not meeting the advertised. Can I just get some clarification on what that means, and if that somehow makes it a candidate for moving forward?
Yeah, so I will answer that question in general, and then I'll let John Bouchard answer it in terms of the actual project. So in general, when we have what we refer to as TIP readiness days, which is where the MassDOT project development division and all of its component parts meet with MPO staff to talk about the readiness of TIP projects. There are projects like those highlighted in purple where MassDOT is confident to say it will not make the year it's programmed. Then there are those projects that are red font where MassDOT says we aren't willing to say it's not going to make it, but we're not sure it's going to make it, and we have some concerns about it. And then we specifically tell the MPO staff members what the concerns are, like it's got a lot of right of way, or it's going to need a permit, but we're not yet willing to say move it, it's not going to be ready. So John, can you talk about Bruce Freeman in any detail?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. Initially, at readiness days, there was discussion that the project may not be ready in 22, and there were some recommendations to move it out to 23. That's why I believe it was showing up in red text on this initial sheet. However, since readiness days from February 10th, 11th, and 12th, we've relooked at it. We've talked with the town and the designer, and with the challenges in front of it, we still feel that a 2022 is going to be doable. But I mean, you know, and everything that we're talking about today, and I don't want to take up anyone's time with anything that doesn't matter, but everything that we're doing today is based on a snapshot of time. If I didn't have a submittal within the last week and we didn't have COVID-19 the affecting our operations, you know, we haven't fully vetted the $9 million for Ferry Street. And I know we have to make decisions based on, you know, the information that we have at the time. But we were looking at Bruce Freeman Trail, Rail Trail originally, that there was some concerns in meeting that deadline. We identified them over the last month. We have talked with the town, the designer, and clarified that, you know, we think it can be delivered in 22, so we've recommended to keep it in 22.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Other comments from, okay, so Lynn Diggins?
Yeah, Lynn Diggins, Advisory Council. Could Freeman be funded over 2 years?
How much, I can't see it on my screen. How much money is it?
It's roughly 13.4.
No, so, right. So in order for a project to be funded over more than 1 year in the Boston MPO region, consistent with federal highway rules, the project has to be scheduled for construction over more than 1 year and cost more than $25 million.
Oh, okay. So it's an and, meaning not just that it would be constructed over 2 years. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Yes. You're welcome, Lynn. Dan?
Daniel Amstutz, Town of Arlington. So to that point about the scheduling over multiple years, I guess I have to ask then about Watertown and the Mount Auburn Street. Is that a 2-year or 3-year project? Do we know? Since that's over 25 million.
John Bouchard, do you know?
Over 2 years, and that's why it's programmed for the AC schedule that it is. I'm trying to get back up. It's on what's it, 22 and 23?
That's correct.
Yeah, that is anticipated, and that, yes, it's anticipated to be funded and take 2 years of construction.
Okay, so my point to being, there's no really flexibility there.
Right. Yes, it's supposed to be it's a 2-year construction season usually.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so other members, comments, suggestions? Rich Benevento, you have a comment?
Yeah, it's just on Mount Auburn Street. That's one of ours as well. That is definitely a 2-year project, if not more. Again, one of the items in that particular project will be dealing with the MBTA and the catenary wires and all that. So a 2-year minimum, I would say, on that project.
All right, thank you, Rich. Other comments, MPO members? Brian Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian Kane, MBTA Advisory Board. I just want to say I liked Len's idea of splitting the $9 million cost increase over 2 years for Ferry Street and then working to find $4.5 million each year. You know, if we wanted to do a tabletop exercise, that wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, so on my screen, because I have to also look at who the participants are, I can't actually. I'm gonna take away the participants for a minute. Can you guys make the screen so that I can see 23, 24, 22, 23, and 24? Like, Okay, thank you. So the members, we have to choose which project or project that adds up to $9 million we're willing to delay or delete from the tip. Okay, so you could take, and I'm just using this one as an example. This isn't my recommendation. You could take, as an example, Boylston Street and put it out of 23 into 25 and free up $8.9 million and probably cover Ferry Street's costs. Again, not my recommendation, just an example in the first one I could come to. But we have to figure out which project or projects that add up to $9 million we want to defer into 2025 or delete. I mean, you could decide, as an example, that, and again, this is not my recommendation, that we weren't going to have a community connections program, and you could take $2 million out of each of those 3 years and find 6 of your $9 million. Again, not my recommendation, but we have to figure it out. So does anybody have any ideas, recommendations, questions? Brian Kane. Thank you, Brian.
Well, yeah, Mr. Chairman, Brian Kane, MBTA Advisory Board. So I would suggest, in the interest of trying to move this forward, that we consider the following scenario. We keep 16 and change in 20 for Ferry Street. We add the 9 million in the next fiscal year, which is 21, and move the Bruce Freeman Trail project to the next year, 23.
Thank you, Brian. Discussion? Tom O'Rourke.
If we do, yeah, if we do that, then don't we need to move another 13 million the following year and so on?
Yes. Yes. Once you move it, there's a ripple effect. Unless you move it all the way into 25.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Right. Maybe to elaborate on the chair's point there. So yeah, really our alternatives are to move around funding for Rutherford Avenue in any given year. So if we move any projects, be it funding for Everett or funding for the Bruce Freeman into a different year, then yeah, we either play around with the funding for Rutherford Avenue in order to move dollars forward and backwards there, or we just continue to bump projects year over year all the way through. Those are really the two options.
Right. But again, I want to stress that AC is not supposed to be some kind of bank / slush fund where you just move costs around to accommodate other projects. At some point, Rutherford Avenue will actually be advertised and it will start having construction spending and it will bill MassDOT for that construction spending. And MassDOT, or actually, no, it won't bill MassDOT. MassDOT will advertise it. MassDOT will go bill the feds for their 80%. You can't move all of the federal money into the back end and expect MassDOT to pay all of the costs up front. So you really can't just willy-nilly shove costs around. The city gave to us today what they believe the appropriate costs are. I'm not saying those are exact costs and you have to meet them, but you can't shove everything of Rutherford into, keep like a token amount in the first 4 years and shove a giant nut into the 5th year. That's not how this works.
Correct.
Lynn?
Okay, so I'm going to back up Brian in on the movement of the Freeman Trail into next year, and let's look into what we can do in that following year. One of the concerns that the advisory council raised was the increased costs of some of these projects. And this was one that was kind of flagged, and not so much in the conversation itself, in the media conversation, but afterwards. So that's part of the reason for pushing it back a little bit. And also the score on it is a little bit low. And so being from Arlington, I also feel that I also need to kind of advocate in looking at the Minuteman train in subsequent years, maybe pushing both of those out a little bit further in order to make room for the Ferry Street project.
Thank you, man. That's we're talking about your project.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I did just want to comment both on the readiness and the cost increase for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail again. This is, such a significant regional and municipal priority for us. We've been working really, really hard to advance it in very close coordination with Mass DOT. And we're right at the threshold of the design public hearing. We don't anticipate significant right-of-way activities being involved, and I know that's one of the things that DOT is often considering whenever they're looking at readiness, and that is not an issue for this project. So we would really advocate for keeping it in 22. I know that you guys have a tremendously difficult challenge that you're looking at right now. I did explain the cost increase associated with the project at the meeting last week. But again, this was due to clarification on the structural components of the project. We have 2 bridges and 1 boardwalk, and the boardwalk in particular required this design change based on the geotechnical findings, and that resulted in the cost increase that you're considering now. So again, I'm happy to provide any additional clarification as needed, but really do hope that you can find a way to keep the project in 22 underneath these difficult circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. So, okay, so if we move Bruce Freeman $13 million backwards, and you only need 9, so theoretically you'd move $4 million of Rutherford forward. That then requires you to move $9 million worth of projects out of 23 into 24 to accommodate the fact that you have $13 million of Bruce Freeman moving into 24. And I'm not actually doing the inflation costs that you have to do because I can't do those in my head. So you got to move, like, if you're doing this, you still got to move. Again, unless the motion is to move, or the idea is to move Bruce Freeman all the way to 25, you've got to move. Now you got to move. You move stuff into 23. Now you got to move stuff out of 23 into 24, and then you're going to have to move stuff out of 24 into 25. Richard Canale.
Yeah. So I like what you had said a little bit ago, David. That maybe we should really start at the 2025 and figure how we move 9 million out of that, and then sort of work backwards from there. So, so part of the question is, the ones that are in 2025. So Hingham is only 15, so that can't be a 2-year thing. And there's no $25 million, so none of those can be moved to a 2-year, which means that eliminating something from the 2025, unless you move out something from an earlier one and drop it completely. The major infrastructure program, if we were to take 6 million from there, and if there's the 3 million from another unidentified, is that a possibility? the mill fitters a 3 million. Should that be taken out with the understanding that it would be in a 2026? So I think that if we're going to be moving things so that unless somebody has an earlier one that they want to drop completely, I think we should attack the 2025 and then fill in from there.
Okay. So in 2025, can you zoom in on the 2025 so we can see the list of projects that are actually proposed for funding in 2025? Thank you. So to Richard's point, the 2025 projects are, am I starting with, you zoomed in a little too much because I can't see the town name. So are the ones that are funded the ones that begin with Ipswich? Is that the row I'm looking at? Or the column I'm looking at?
It's the region-wide transit modernization program, and the light blue would be the first line.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. All right. So what's funded in 25? But Matt, how much of a gap have we? So this program's all of 25. What I'm seeing in front of me.
So there is on the next page, sorry, there's a $12 million hold for a major infrastructure project. And then further back up the page there's also funding for Rutherford Avenue at $44 million and $2 million for community connections.
Right. So let me, I'm going to call on people in a second, but let me make this question. Do we have any reason to believe that any of the major infrastructure projects will actually be ready in 2025 as opposed to starting in 2026? And again, let me state for the record, even though people may have been told something different, MassDOT will continue our design work on Natick and Somerville, regardless of whether they're in the TIP. And we will continue design reviews of Lynn, regardless of whether it's in the 2025 TIP. My question is, and this might be to John Bouchard or any of the project proponents who are on the phone or on the computer, is there a reason to believe any of these projects will actually start in 25? Because theoretically, if they won't, we can decide next year, again, with MassDOT's commitment to continue to move design forward, we can decide next year which of those projects to program in which years, with the assumption of we do have a commitment to all three and we've got to figure out how to fit all of their costs in the next 4 years of TIP cycles. But it would free up $9 million right now, and you wouldn't have to shove, it's what you would shove out of 25, and then you could just shove projects out of 23, 24, and 23 and 24 into 25, and you would create that bucket. But I don't want to do it if there's actually a project that we believe is going to be ready in 25 and should start in 25 in order to make it, fulfill our commitment to it over the 5 years of the LRTP. So John Bouchard, can you answer that very long-winded question?
Rephrase the question. Do we think anything of those three projects are going to start in 2025?
As opposed to 2026 or beyond?
Yeah, I think that that's a stretch with the amount of work that has to go forward, and we didn't have although as you stated, we will continue with design, even though funding hasn't been fully committed to a specific year. But we still have a lot of work to be done on those major projects. So I think 2026 is probably the earliest that we're focusing.
Okay. So because this issue actually relates to one of his projects, I'm going to call Tom Bent out of order. Tom Bent, can you unmute Tom, please? Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, David. And again, Somerville's agreement has always been, that we'd like to see construction start on McGrath in 2026. And the only reason why we were advocating for 25, because we were, again, under the maybe misunderstanding that we needed to get money in there to continue on with design. So if the commitment's there that MassDOT's going to pick up that design again and get this thing moving, we're fine with that.
Thank you, Tom. I'm sure that what was told to you is what was told to you, and I'm sure the person who told you believed it was true. But I can commit to you today, and John Bouchard has just seconded it, that we will continue the design process of all three major infrastructure projects, regardless of whether they're programmed in 2025. Now, there will come a point next year where the MPO will actually have to decide some of these issues, because at some point we do have to show construction funding to keep moving projects. But for this year, we'll move them as if they're in the tip. That's our commitment. Right, John?
David, Tom again, can you hear me?
Yes, Tom.
I mean, I'm 100% fine with that. And again, the goal is to get them going on 26. And I think as, Tom Lamar earlier talked about, some of those commitments, and Brad recently, almost all our work that we're doing, whether it's complete streets, bicycles, the infrastructure work in Union Square, is all funneling towards that McGrath Highway, get started around 26, because it really completes the long-range transportation plan that we've been working very closely with MassDOT and to achieve. So, I think that's, that's good enough for me, your commitment on that, so.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, so now I've got MPO members lined up to talk, and first up is MPO members and others. Brian Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian Kane, MBTA Advisory Board. I was just going to note that it might be fair to cover a $9 million cost increase in Everett while moving a $10.6 million Everett project out to 26, or to an out year. We have rehab of Beachman Street from 99 to Chelsea City Line, $10.64 million in 24. We would push that to 26 if we need to cascade projects. I think in interest of fairness, that one is a good target. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I would note, however, that assuming that everybody agrees that we'll leave the major infrastructure program question for next year, we could actually move the Beecham Street from 24 into 25 and free up the space in 24. But thank you for that. Eric Barassa.
Do we have to make this decision today, or could staff create a couple different scenarios for our next meeting?
So if you do not make this decision today, we are delaying the probably the completion issuance of the CIP, and we are delaying the advertisement of projects throughout the Commonwealth, again, only by a week, but we are delaying them because once we're all done, we're going to bundle it all up into an amendment for the feds to approve so we can get projects advertised. So I'd rather do it today. Do we have to do it today? No, but there are certainly impacts of not doing it today.
Okay.
Janie Gretler. You're unmuted, Janie.
Board of Selectmen, Sudbury, obviously going to reference the Bruce Green Rail Trail. I spoke last week. I think I've come to you a couple of years ago, also spoke passionately as a resident. I'm now on the Board of Selectmen. As you all know, Sudbury has had this project before it for many, many years. We have had many, many votes. We have put significant money towards this project. We have significant money allocated, appropriated to continue and to complete the design of this project. We have grants that are tied to this project. We are pending hearing about another grant for this project. We have the CSX portion of this of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail to continue through Sudbury, throughout our transportation corridor, our commercial corridor, sorry, to Framingham. There is a lot happening in Sudbury aside from this, and this, you know, if I really worry that if this gets pushed out, that just will further delay all of these other important parts of this project. So I really encourage you to keep this on for 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. Jay Monty.
Yeah, Jay Monty, Everett. So I've been conferring with some folks here, Rich Benevento included. We're fine moving Beecham Street out to 2025. I'd really like to not move to 2026, but certainly think it's a fair offer, given that our cost has increased to the extent that it has on Ferry Street. So we're willing to make that trade for sure.
Thank you, Jay. Lynn?
Advisory board, I understand how people who support the Freedom Trail feel, and I can also appreciate that maybe other towns don't have people advocating for them, but their important projects are as important to them. With that said, though, I am willing to entertain more seriously moving out, keeping Freeman where it is, moving the Minuteman Trail a year back, and then moving Beecham Street, which Jay just into 25, and then we might just have to cover like $1 million or $2 million, and maybe we can take that from Rutherford or something.
All right, so let's assume for a second, just so we can see if we can get some motion. We'll assume that major infrastructure won't be funded this year, again, subject to MassDOT commitment on design, and we will definitely have to figure out how to fund those projects beginning in 2026. But let's assume for a second we don't have a major infrastructure program in 2025. Then if we move the Beecham Street project into 25 from 24, can you show us the 24 projects now and the 23 projects, because we're going to do this cascading backward thing? Can you move the screen so I can? Can you guys hear me?
No, I'm
Can you guys
moving.
hear me?
No.
Okay, thanks. Just want to make sure.
No,
That's okay.
I'm currently getting my internet connection is unstable, so this might be on a mass delay. So I have 24 and part of 23 showing right now.
Right. So you can actually make it smaller now. So I think what we haven't taken a vote or agreed to anything yet, but what I think we're looking at doing is we'll move Beecham Street into, we won't fund major infrastructure in 25. We'll move Beecham Street out of 24 into 25. Thank you very much, both Brian Kane and Jay Monty, for working that out for us. So I just got to find, that's hard for me to figure this out. So where is, move it into 25. That creates a $10.6 million availability in 24, right? That we can then move projects equaling 10.6 million, solve our problem, because we can figure out the cash flows on Ferry Street, which is a 3-year project at least, right? Does that work, Matt?
Yeah, we would. Yeah, definitely need to find a project in 23 to move out.
Right.
Yep. So I think
Right.
that'd be the,
Is the beginning of the 23 projects the Rentham project, because that's the one I can see at the top of my screen?
that is correct.
Rent them into 24, so it's not really a 23 project, right? And we moved Wilmington into 24, so it's not a 23 project. So we could move Peabody, we could move Cohasset, Beverly, or some combination of the remaining projects, or we could move a 22 project into 23 and then do all the cash flows in 21 and 22 in Everett, right? So we could theoretically, as an example, move Boylston 1 year into 2022, and I think that would allow us to fund Everett over 2 years by tweaking the cash flow on Rutherford Avenue just a little, and I think actually consistent with what the city told us, like $1 million less. And then I think that works, doesn't it, Matt?
Well, so the scenario that we're showing already has Boylston Street moved into 22.
Right. So what I'm saying is if you move Boylston into 23, okay?
Oh, into 23, my apologies.
Right. So if you move Boylston into 23 and therefore programmed Ferry Street over, and then you would have to, I guess then we'd have to still move something out of 23. Is that what we just have to do? I don't. So does that work, Matt? I think that works.
Sorry, my question. Just to clarify, this would involve moving the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail back into 22 as opposed to.
Yes, I would leave Bruce Freeman in what I've just suggested. I would leave Bruce Freeman where it is. I would actually, the only projects I think I'm moving are Boylston. I'm moving a year. The Everett project I'm moving a year, and did I move something else?
Sorry, I'm just trying to.
And does that work?
Sorry, trying to catch up on that. So so I think that scenario leaves us where we would have to take roughly 9 million in funding from Rutherford in 2023, unless we wanted to move and put it into 2024, unless we wanted to move another 2023 project out to 20.
Okay, so what projects from 2023? So I'd still have to move a project into, yeah. So moving Boylston didn't help me at all, right?
Well, it helps keep Bruce Freeman in 22.
Okay.
So now 24, because we're over programmed in 23 and under programmed in 24. So I guess one alternative would be to sort of flip flop the funding for Rutherford Avenue and increase the funding in 2024 and decrease it in 23. But that gets us a little bit further away from the AC schedule that Bill Conroy mentioned earlier.
Right, but I don't want having moved Boylston to have affected Rutherford negatively. So I don't think that's fair or makes any sense, actually.
Yeah, so I guess the alternative would be to choose a 2023 project that we'd like to move into 2024. For roughly $9 million.
All right. Anybody have any candidates?
We do have a couple of comments ready to be made.
Okay, I'm sorry. I turned off my comments, so I can't. Thank you. So I'm going to call on MPO members first before I call on non-members. Dan?
Hi, Daniel Amstutz, Town of Arlington. Thanks. I guess, well, a suggestion then and a question. I guess based on the projects that are currently in 2023, the EBD Central Street project, just from looking at the status updates, it appears to be the sort of, I don't know, farthest out, just because the other projects have 25% either submittals or approvals, where it is only PRC approved. It also happens to be a little over $10 million, which would, which would be the amount, of course, that we're looking for, and the perhaps have a little bit of buffer space if we're only looking at $9 million. So that would be my suggestion. The other question I had is is the Minuteman Bikeway extension in Bedford, is that still proposed to be pushed out only to 23 and not any further?
Right. So we haven't actually made any decision yet with regards to Bruce Freeman or Minuteman, whether to move one. So there's still a possibility, I think, that if we moved, just under your example, Peabody into 23, we could then decide whether we wanted to move Boylston or one of the bike paths into 23, into the hole created when we moved Peabody into 24, into that hole. And one of those projects would be delayed by a year. But I can't support personally moving Boston, one of Boston's projects, if it's going to have a negative impact on Boston's other project, much like we did for Everett. So as long as we move something in 23, I think there's a place for us to talk about with Boylston.
The one Central Street.
Right. Right. And so if we moved it as an example, if we moved it into 24, it creates the hole in 23 we need to move something out of 22 to accommodate the Everett project. And then we can either decide whether to move one of the bike paths or whether we could move Boylston, or I suppose we could look at cash flow, but that becomes very sort of dicey.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, Kane?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would look at moving the Minuteman Bikeway extension from 2024 to $7.3 million. We had 5.7, which we could probably do a.
Thank you, Brian. Richard Canale?
Sure. So two things. One is the advisory council's concern about overruns. And so if the big thing about the overrun is a highway project, why would we want to completely agree with whomever from Arlington about the Peabody, because their PRC was approved in 2017. And do we have any update in terms of where their 25% design is?
Matt Genova, do you have any idea?
I could, if you give me a minute, I could pull up some notes on it. Yeah, so I'm actually not seeing any sort of tangible updates on that project's progress. I keep looking, and maybe able to find something, but I don't think we've gotten a lot of communication on that one recently. On the
Okay, well, I still have the microphone. I'll sign off by saying I think the Peabody seems to be the prime candidate to move from 23 to 24.
Thank
David,
you.
I will note. Oh, I'm
Lynn
sorry. I
Biggin?
was just going to say that I see that Will Pollitt from
No, go ahead.
from Peabody has his hand raised, so I don't know if he potentially has some updates on that project.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm going to take, thank you, Matt, but I'm going to take MPO members first, and then I will let everybody else who's raised their hand speak before we do anything where we take a vote.
Absolutely.
So I'm trying to get MPO members in first. Thank you, Matt. Lynn?
Glenn Diggins, Advisory Board. Well, a point of order question and then my question. What did Brian Kane say? I heard nothing of what he said.
So what I think he said was, and Brian can correct me, I think he was talking about moving the Minuteman Bikeway back a
Okay.
year.
All right, fine. I'm still fine with that.
Brian, if I got that wrong.
Yeah.
Yep.
Back issue. I think sometimes the folks whose microphones are creating this kind of buzzy sound is it's a feedback issue. But anyways, respect to 2023, I hear what Dan's saying about the Peabody project, but I put a lot of stock in the evaluation scores and controlling for the project type, complete streets. The Cohasset project is so much lower than the Peabody project, and we're talking so far out that I know we take the risk that the Peabody project may end up costing more as it gets designed more, but I guess I would push for, or I would advocate for pushing the Cohasset project back a year more so than I would the Peabody project. That's all. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn. Dan?
Thanks again, Town of Arlington, Daniel Amstutz. I was having a hard time hearing what Brian Kane was saying as well, so I appreciate the recap of that. I think I understand what Len is saying about Cohasset. I think, or they're both complete streets, but the Cohasset one Situate one has a lower score. I don't know if that was what he was getting at. I don't have a particular preference in terms of which one of those whichever one out of 23 or whichever one of those ends up getting moved back. But I would disagree about moving the Minuteman Bikeway extension any further back from 2023. So I would support keeping Sudbury, keeping the Bruce Freeman where it is, but moving the Bedford project back 1 year, but I would not be agreeable to moving it back another year.
Thank you, Dan. Aaron Clausen?
Chair, this is Aaron Clausen, City of Beverly. I just wanted to echo Len's comments about the scores. Personally, I just tend to look at the score of a project, the evaluation score that staff puts forward. Aren't flagged for any delay, so I would tend to agree with Len on looking at Cohasset as the for moving out.
Thanks, Aaron. All right, members have spoken. Now, Will Pollitt from Peabody. State your name and affiliation for the record, please.
Hi, good afternoon. It's William Pollitt with the City of Peabody as the city engineer. So just wanted to quickly speak on the Peabody project, Central Street, which we have before the MPO. We submitted comments, very limited comments for the last meeting about being ready in approximately 4 weeks. We're actually about 2 weeks out at this point for submitting our 25% design plans.
Excellent. Thank you. Steve Boudreau.
Yes.
State your name and affiliation for the record, okay?
Yep. Stephen Boudreau, representing the town of Hingham, Todd Mayo, administrator, talking about the Route 3A project. And I know this is maybe going to throw a whack into things a little bit here, but I do know the town did submit in 2 support letters objecting to the push from 2024 to 2025 for this project. They've got, we do know we had a cost increase, and I know they want to reach out and express their gratitude in terms of accommodating that cost increase. Not 2025. We've had the town's a major commitment to this project. Certainly it's been going on since 2009. Based on the recent coordination with the design consultant, one thing we wanted to point out is, the project is well within schedule to complete before 2024, possibly even by 2023. Taking a look at the current schedule, the CRM and the public hearing were originally scheduled for this month, and April 29th, obviously with what's going on, have now been pushed a little bit. We're hoping it's not going to be a number of months. We hope it's a number of weeks. But having said that, we're well in hand with the schedule, and we've actually got a schedule right now that would put us project ready in 2023. So I guess one of my comments is using the logic that we used not a few minutes back on the 2025 year, looking at the 2024 year. Are there any projects in the 2024 year that could be deemed not project ready? I think that was the question asked about the 2025 that could be pushed, from 2024 to 2025, for instance, or even further, to make room for some of these projects that are definitely going to be project ready for 2024. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you. Rich Benevento?
Thank you. Thank you. I want to speak on behalf of the Central Street project in Peabody. That is another one of our projects. Again, Rich Benevento, World Tech Engineering, working with the city of Peabody. Will mentioned that, we're within 2 weeks. We actually may be as early as next week in submitting the 25s. And as Aaron Clausen mentioned, with a score of 61, this is a major project for the city, one that they have not had in many years. And it's a key project for the city. It's the main spine coming into the city from 128 through Wilson Square. So we're well poised to make the 25s next week. We had public information meetings, overwhelming public support. I believe the headline in the Salem News was Central Street Project meets with applause from residents. So I would be concerned if this thing were moving on behalf of the mayor. I'm sure he would have some concerns about that.
All right. Thanks, Rich. Other comments from the MPO or the public? So Matt, can you tell us what our options are?
Yeah, I can. What I'll do is do a quick recap of what. So I've been working sort of alongside this conversation and making the changes as they sort of appear and as folks coalesce around them. So I'll tell you what I think I heard in this conversation, which would put us in a position to sort of even everything out. And you I guess if you all could then tell me if you think that that's correct or if you'd like me to make any further changes. So I'll go through year by year. So in 2020, we have everything the same as it was proposed in the original scenario. So no changes were needed there. In 2021, we also have not made any changes. So we've got the 16.6 million for Ferry Street in there as it was in the scenario that was posted. The remainder of the Ferry Street project has been added to 2022. That's the $8.4 million for assuming a $25 million cost. And in order to account for that additional cost in 2022, Boylston Street in Boston is now programmed in 2023. But that allows us to keep Sudbury, the Bruce Truman Rail Trail in 2022. And that also sort of confirms that the Minuteman Bikeway in Bedford is still remaining in 2023. From there, the Cohasset project in 2023 is moved out to 2024. And finally, or well, not quite finally, in 2024, the Everett Beecham Street project is moved from 24 to 25. And then the $12 million that we had allocated to major infrastructure drops down to something like $1.1 million remaining. And that funding there's sort of three options. One, we could leave it unallocated. Two, we could, I guess, program we could program one of the two smallest intersection improvement projects. That's the project in Milton or the project in Westwood, listed at the bottom of the table. Or the third option is that we take that $1.1 million and allocate it to the $44 million currently for Rutherford Avenue, which would bring that up to 45 and change. So that's where we're at. Yeah, I welcome comments or concerns.
Excellent, Matt. Thank you. So, Eric, are you on? You're still here, right? Just raise your hand so I can see you, Eric Barassa. Okay, Eric, I'm going to say something as chair, and then I want to hear what you have to say as vice chair, okay? And then I think, Tegan, I'm going to need you to chime in too, because, so I think we've done really good work today under very trying circumstances that, again, I apologize on behalf of MassDOT to a certain extent that some of our delay, and again, I'm not apologizing because anybody in John Bouchard shopped anything wrong. We got the information to you late. We're sorry, okay? We've done a lot of work here. However, I am mindful that this is a virtual public meeting, and I want to make sure the public have the right to review and comment on the newest draft. So Eric asked earlier, what happens if we delay this a week? So if we delay this a week, the only way that works for our advertisement schedule is if the MPO has the ability to and would be willing to commit to a 14-day public review process on this amendment instead of a 21 days. That would give the public a week before we vote to review it and only 2 weeks after we vote to put it out on the street to make their comments. If we can't do that, then we need to vote it out today, and that gives everybody 3 weeks to comment on it, but it comments after an MPO vote. So Eric, I'd like to hear your comments first since you raised the issue. And by the way, this still delays the CIP, but we will deal with delaying the CIP by a week. First, I'd like to hear, Eric, what you think. Then I'd like to hear Tegan to make sure we actually can waive our process and have a 14-day amendment review procedure. Again, understanding that we are in the middle of a pandemic and things are different than they used to be. And then once that's happened, I'd like to hear from all the other members who want to make a comment on it. Eric, can you comment?
If we can do what you just laid out, and I think if we can have the proposal as Matt just put forward as the thing that people comment on, I think that's a great idea.
All right. So Tegan, raise your hand so we can unmute you.
I think I'm unmuted.
So is it possible to have a 14-day? I know other MPOs have voted 14 days because we had to delay their meetings due to COVID-19. Is it possible for the MPO to take a vote to next week, or we can even take that vote today if we want, to have a 14-day review process on the amendment, assuming everybody wants to?
I am checking with Annette on some of these details. I recall that we changed. So what I'm worried about is if there needs to be any kind of amendment to the PPP and a review period related to that. I know that we are stuck with the LRTP needing 30 days, and I believe we set the tip at 21 days. And I'm not sure we included language about being able to revise that without revising the PPP. So I'm hoping that Annette might be able to speak to that. I'm sorry, Annette, to put on the spot.
So Annette, when you're ready to answer that question, raise your hand. But in the meantime, can other members, if they want, weigh in on the concept of, would you like to have staff draft an amendment, put it out for review before next week, so the public can see that amendment and know that's what we're talking about, and marshal their forces to comment at the meeting, and then only have 2 weeks for the actual public process after release? Or would you prefer to just vote something out now and give people 3 weeks to try to change our minds during the public process? So Dan?
Thanks, Daniel. Amsterdam, Town of Arlington. I am agreeable to the concept that Matt has laid out. I think that's maybe the best we can do. I am a little bit confused about the voting and putting something out for the period, either 14 or 21 day, because we aren't planning to have another MPO meeting between now and April 16th. But are we suggesting that we're going to have another one? I mean, there are other action items that we have on the plate that would be surprised if we're able to get to them.
I have actually, and maybe it's just my calendar's not up to date, I have a meeting scheduled on next Thursday, April 2nd on my calendar. Maybe it just didn't get taken down when we canceled it.
My understanding is that we had discussed not having a meeting next week. There would be a UPWP committee meeting at the same time as we would normally have the MPO meeting, and then I don't have one scheduled for the April 9th.
Okay. All right, must not have been taken off my calendar because it's on my calendar for April 2nd. I have a meeting scheduled on my calendar with the Boston MPO for April 2nd. But be that as it may, let's talk about this issue first, and then we'll figure out whether we can even actually accommodate it. So the question is, for members, would you prefer to have a vote today and start a 21-day public process? Or if it's possible, would you prefer to have staff prepare this amendment that we've just talked about through the last hour and a half, put it out for the public to see before we vote it, and then have a 2-week public process on the actual amendment after it's voted? Brian Kane.
I think it has some important information for us.
Megan?
Thank you.
Megan?
Thank you. I did just want to say that I was reading in the PDP that it does say that in extraordinary circumstances, such as an unforeseen regulatory requirement or funding deadline, the MPO may vote to shorten the public comment period to a minimum of 15 days. And in the emergency circumstances, such as the need to take immediate action to protect public safety or take advantage of extraordinary funding opportunity, the MPO may waive the comment period. So I do believe that that gives you all the freedom to say that this is, an extraordinary case, although I will let, Annette weigh in before we finish this conversation if she or anyone disagrees with me. I will say also that we did say that we would allocate the April 2nd time to soon the executive director comments and otherwise on April 2nd to UPWP committee meeting, but I believe that we can talk about, and it's not set in stone, what the sort of the schedule is, so we can talk about if we need to try to change the meeting schedule slightly to accommodate this different situation we were expecting.
Thank you. Thatcher?
Yes, thanks. When Eric initially proposed, the alternate scheduled, I was of the mind of let's get this thing done now. But given the way the conversation's gone and the difficulty I have as an MPO member is I'm getting it all verbally, and it would be helpful to delay the week, and it sounds like that's possible, so that we can look at an actual spreadsheet with all the changes before voting, rather than just from my perspective, just relying on trying to track the whole conversation and then voting on what I think was said rather than what I see. So I support Eric's suggestion about getting this in plain writing in front of us for a week, and then voting to put out in the public on a shorter time frame to meet the rest of the schedule.
Thank you, Thatcher. Brian Kane.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Matt for being able to do the math. I like that. That was really helpful. This scenario really only moves 2 or 3 projects. Thank you, Jay, Monty, and Everett, for your magnanimity there and moving Beecham Street. You know, we're moving Boylston, we're moving Ferry, we're moving Cohasset. So this is great. We've been able to save the rail path projects, which is awesome. I'm really happy with this outcome. I'm okay voting it today if need be. I'm also okay waiting a week. You know, it is an extraordinary circumstances, but I think we've given ample notice. So I'm willing to go today if that's the decision of the board, but I'm also willing to come next week. Thank you.
All right, Tom Cactus.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I'm taking out my coin, my figurative coin right now, and I'm flipping it, David. No, actually, all kidding aside, I think that, like Mr. Kane had mentioned, there are several projects that have been moved. In the scheme of things, it's relatively straightforward. I would advocate for making the vote today, but I'm certainly flexible. I think if this isn't the 6 of this, a half a dozen of that, I'm not sure what is. I think the beauty of the vote today is it puts a finish on a pretty good day's work by the MPO, and I'm not even too sure if we're finished our work today. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Yep. Aaron Clausen.
Thank you, Chair. Aaron Clausen, City of Beverly. Also appreciate how Matt was able to lay out a scenario, alternative scenario for us to vote on. I personally would be also comfortable with moving forward with a vote to put it out to public comment. Gives folks 21 days to respond and comment to what we're putting out. So there was a lot of moving parts, but I think the board and staff have pulled together a fair and balanced solution.
Okay. Tom O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would echo that. I support the recommendations and suggestions that were made today, and would support putting it out for a vote and hearing what people have to say. And then just one other thing, if we did have to meet again, I think one of the advantages of meeting virtually is that we can meet virtually anytime. So perhaps a meeting, if needed, could be scheduled sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Tina Cassidy.
To today, and also to get directly to one last question, Matt, I would also be in favor of leaving what would the $1.1 million balance in 25 unprogrammed.
Thank you. Lynn Diggins.
But my question is, having the ability to talk about this twice, increase the chances that people can amend things versus just having the ability to comment once. My question, I guess, really is, would an MPO member really have the ability to do an amendment or change things if we only had one more comment period?
Right. So yes, you would get another bite at the apple. I can't tell you whether anybody would come in other than just to vote yes. But yes, you would have a second chance to try to change other people's minds as opposed to voting this week. You have another week to try to convince people. I am sensing from the members who have commented that there's a sense that we can vote this out today for a 21 public comment period. I'm happy to go either way, but I do need somebody to make a motion one way or the other. Annette, do you have something you need to say, or are we in agreement that you can go ahead, Annette?
I just wanted to clarify that the 15-day emergency period was for amendments, not actually for full documents. So if we're talking about voting out the tip, then I don't think the 15-day period applies. The way I read our.
But we are just talking about voting out the tip amendment. So.
Okay.
I mean, actually, right now we're talking about the tip. But when we vote out the tip amendment later, it's going to be the exact same thing as this is, because what happens in 20 causes the cascading effect. But yeah, you're right. We'd have to put this, but we could come back next week and put this one out for 21 days, I guess, or what. So, okay, Brian Kane, you have something you want to say?
Well, if you're prepared to accept a motion at this time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make one.
Yes, please,
This
Brian.
is Brian Kane, MBTA Advisory Board. I'd like to move that the MPO release for a 21-day public comment period, the federal fiscal years 21 to 25 transportation improvement program as presented by Matt Genova within the last 20 minutes. And I will get to staff to make that pretty.
Thank you. Richard Canale?
Second that. I second that.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing, Dan?
Sorry, just a clarification. I think, are we releasing the amendment for 2020 to 2024 out for, sorry, I'm just a little bit confused because we're talking about the amendment and then we're also talking about the rest of the actual 21 to 25 day scenario or 25
Thank you, Dan.
year scenario.
So thank you. I actually got us confused. So this vote right now is to approve the TIP program that staff will then go off and put together into the final TIP for our approval. If this passes, we will immediately take a vote to release the 2020 amendment, which will also be this exact same document. It will just be released as the amendment, and it won't include the FY25 because that's not part of the FY24 TIP. But we will have two documents out that are the exact same, only the 21 TIP has 21 through 25. The 20 TIP amendment has 20 through 24, but their overlapping years will be exactly the same. We just, staff did the amendment first so we could see the rolling impact into did the TIP program first so we could see the rolling impact into 25. So this is actually just a vote to approve the projects as presented by Matt Genova as the TIP, which will be voted out in a meeting in April. Is that right, Matt?
Yes, that is correct. So we'll take a final vote to release the formal TIP document that includes all these projects at the April 30th MPO meeting.
Right, but immediately upon voting this, we will then take a motion on the TIP amendment that will have a 21-day public process, which will be the exact same document, except it will have 20 in it and it won't have 25. But the three overlapping years will be the same, and anybody who wants to know what's happening in 25 will have this document available so they can see that their project didn't fall off the face of the earth.
Yes.
So there is a motion and a second to approve the 2021-2025 TIP program as presented by Matt Genova probably 15 to 20 minutes ago. And there is a second. Call the roll, please, gentlemen.
Okay, David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard, John Bouchard,
Yes, I was muted.
okay, John Romano,
Hey, I'm sorry to jump in here. It would be helpful if voting MPO members could just raise their hands right now so I don't have to scroll through the full list of people in the room. That would be very helpful to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
No worries.
John Romano,
Yes.
Samantha Silverberg,
Yes.
Hayes Morrison,
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we
Yes.
heard you, Hayes. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Eric Barassa,
Yes.
Brian Kane,
Yes.
Jay Monty,
He said yes, Brian. Jonathan.
Okay. Leonard Diggins,
Yes.
Tom Kadzis,
I just raised my hand. Yes. If Jim Fitzgerald has left the meeting, Bill Conroy can cast a vote for him.
Okay. Can you, Bill, raise your hand so you get up into the. Unmute Bill so we can vote for Boston, please.
Bill Conroy, yes.
Thank you, guys. Okay, Jonathan, keep going.
okay, David Kozis,
Yes.
Daniel Amstutz,
Yes.
Richard Canali,
Richard Canali, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom, yes. Thank you, Tom.
Yep.
Austin Saganowitz,
Yes.
Patrick Keyser,
I'll support this, yes.
Aaron Clausen,
Yes.
Tina Cassidy,
Yes.
Glenn Trindade,
He appears to no longer be in the meeting.
okay, Tom O'Rourke,
Yes.
okay.
Thank you.
everyone.
That motion. Yep. Thank you. That motion carries. Can you put the agenda back up? Because there's 2 other votes we need to take.
Give me one moment here.
Thank you, Matt.
With the delay, that should be coming up in just a moment.
Thanks. Okay, so the next item is an action item on voting the TIP amendment out. As I discussed earlier, it's the exact same document we just voted out, with the exception of it'll show 2020 and it won't show 2025, but it's the exact same document. Brian Kane has his hand up.
I'd like to move that, please, sir.
Thank you. And Eric Barassa has his hand up.
I second that.
Thank you. I guess there are other changes. I guess I jumped the gun, huh, Matt? There's statewide changes that have to happen that's on the screen now.
Yes, Mr. Chair, just to clarify for folks. So as the chair pointed out, the vast majority of TIP Amendment 3 covers the ground that we've already discussed today, and which you just have agreed to. But there are 4 statewide highway projects that are listed here, 2 of which are being reprogrammed from 2020 into 2021, and then 2 other of which had cost changes. So those 4 projects will be included in the amendment, and these are all using statewide highway funding. And then there's one other element, which is the 2020 transit element of this amendment, which includes the awarding of 2 grants through MassDOT's Workforce Transportation Program. Those grants were awarded in February of 2020 during the first round of this program. And those grants go 1 apiece to the Cape and Regional Transportation Authority and the Metro West RTA. So those are the contents of the amendment, again, in addition to everything that we've just discussed on the regional target side of things.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I'll get them to remove it in a second. Any questions on this? Seeing none, can Brian and Eric raise your hand and re-motion it to include these changes? Brian Kane, are you there?
So
Brian,
moved.
can you make? Thank you, Eric.
I second that.
Thank you very much. Sorry for jumping the gun, Matt. Jonathan, you can call the roll. Everybody who's an MPO member, please raise your hand so you go to the top of the screen. Thank you all very much. Now, Jonathan, call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
Yes.
John Romano,
Yes.
Samantha Silverberg,
Yes.
Hayes Morrison,
Yes.
Eric Barassa,
Yes.
Ryan Kane,
Yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Yes.
Tom Kadzis, Tom Kadzis,
Hi, Jonathan. Yes.
Bill Conroy,
Here.
Say
Here.
yes,
Okay.
Bill. Thank you.
Jay Monty,
Yes.
David Kozis,
Yes.
Daniel Amstutz,
Yes.
Richard Canali,
Richard Canali, yes.
Tom Bent,
Yes.
Austin Saganowitz,
Yes.
Thatcher Keyser,
Yes.
Aaron Clausen,
Yes.
Tina Cassidy,
Tina Cassidy, yes.
Glenn Trindade,
He's left, Jonathan.
he left, that's right. Tom O'Rourke,
Yes.
okay, the motion carries.
Thank you. That motion carries. I believe we have one more action item we've got to take. Is there? Can you get the agenda up?
It's on the way, just moving slowly.
Okay.
Folks, I believe the chair has been disconnected. We should be ready to roll in just a few moments.
All right. Sorry, guys. I got cut off. So the next, can everybody hear me? Can anybody hear me?
Yes, you're good.
Sorry, I got cut off, guys. It was totally my fault. So I believe we need to vote out the 2024 Long-Range Transportation Plan Amendment, right? It is to just include projects that have gone over $25 million that are included in the TIP amendment and the draft TIP or just the TIP amendment as voted today. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if people would like Ann to make a presentation on that, we can certainly have a presentation, but it really is just the formulaic adding projects to the major infrastructure program in the TIP, in the LRTP, because they've gone over $25 million and we funded them in the TIP. Eric?
To make those changes to the long-range transportation plan.
Thank you. Brian Kane?
I am proud to second Derek Barassa's motion.
Thank you. Call the roll. Any discussion? And again, this, like the tip amendment, will be out for 21 days. Well, I think this one actually, does this require a 30-day public comment period?
Yes, 30 days.
So the tip amendment went out for 21 days. This one is a vote for a 30-day public comment period on these changes. All right, can everybody, oh wait, Tegan, you have a question?
Just a comment that I do believe that since this covered amendments, that since this is an LRTP amendment, if it's a problem that it is at a 30-day period, that could be discussed. Because it's the amendments that the sort of emergency type, that the emergency language applies to.
All right, then, so then Eric and Brian, is it okay if we put this out for 21 days due to the emergencies of COVID-19? Eric? Will you make that motion?
I make the motion for a 21 public comment period.
Brian?
I always agree with Eric Barassa.
As do we all. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Tegan. Call the roll, Jonathan, please.
Hey, David Moeller.
Yes.
John Bouchard.
Yes.
John Romano.
Yes.
Samantha Silverberg.
Yes.
Hayes Morrison.
Yes.
Eric Barassa.
Yes.
Brian Kane.
Yes.
Leonard Diggins.
Yes.
Tom Kadzis.
Yes.
Bill Conroy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Jay Monty.
Yes.
David Kozis.
He may have disconnected from the meeting.
Okay. Daniel Amstutz.
Yes.
Richard Canale.
Richard Canale, yes.
Tom Bent.
Tom Bent, yes.
Austin Saganowitz.
Yes.
Patrick Keyser.
Patrick Keyser votes yes.
Aaron Clausen.
Yes.
Tina Cassidy.
Tina Cassidy, yes.
And Tom O'Rourke.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. That motion carries. So I'm going to take the prerogative of the chair, and we're not handling any more items that aren't absolutely necessary. Do we need to vote the UPWP amendment today, Tegan? If we do, we certainly will. We'll take the time, but if not, can we push it to the next meeting?
I believe, if you don't mind, it could be very, very brief, and we should be able to do it because the UPWP is recommending it, but we can move the shuttle program.
Okay, sure, of course. So whoever presenting the UPWP amendment, please do make it as brief as possible, and then we'll let the members have their discussion and make any motions. Thanks, Beth.
Sure. Thank you, David. Thank you, Tegan. So I'm Ben Muller, MassDOT Office of Transportation Planning and chair of the Boston MPO UPWP committee. Just presenting UPWP Amendment 1, which would add a new task titled CTPS Strategic Planning and MPO Operations Plan Support. This amendment was posted along with the meeting agenda and other items on the CTPS website. This task will enable CTPS to engage in the development of a 5-year strategic plan and provide direction for an operations plan consistent with the corrective action outlined by our federal partners in the 2019 certification review. This task has a budget of $120,000 funded through federal fiscal year 2019 5303 funds from FTA. that were unused in federal fiscal year 2019 due to a change in contract lengths. Tegan can answer more detailed questions about this task. So if you have any, this amendment was discussed in detail at the UPWP committee this morning, with the general recommendation for the MPO board to release this amendment for a public comment period.
Excellent, Ben. Thank you. Are there any questions of either Ben or Tegan? Seeing none, can I get a motion to, oh, yeah, Brian Kane, can you make a motion to release it for 21 days?
I'd much rather Eric
Brian?
do it. I'd much rather Eric do it. 'Cause he's
I'll make the motion
Eric, what
to
are you-
release for 30 days.
21 days, I think it's.
20 days, sorry.
Brian
Second.
King seconds it. So can everybody raise their hand so we can call the roll? Jonathan, go ahead and start. Jonathan? All right. Matt Archer, call the roll. Somebody call the roll.
I'm here. I'm unmuted. David Moeller.
Yes.
John Bouchard.
I'm not seeing him in the meeting.
He
Okay.
may have signed it. No.
Okay. John Romano.
Yes.
Samantha Silverberg.
Yes.
Hayes Morrison.
Yes.
Eric Barassa.
Yes.
I believe that was a yes. Brian Kane.
Since he made the motion,
Brian Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins.
Sorry, I didn't get to make the most of that one. Yes.
Tom Cat. oh,
Tom Cadd says yes.
Okay. Bill Conroy.
Bill Conroy, yes.
Jay Monty.
Yes.
David Kozis. Oh, he's gone. Daniel Amstutz. He may be gone too. Richard Canali.
Richard Kelly, yes.
Tom Bent. Austin Saganowitz. Oh,
John Bent,
Tom
yes.
Tom Bent, yes.
Thank you, Tom.
Austin Saganowitz.
Austin Saganowitz, yes.
Patrick Keyser.
Patrick Keyser votes yes.
Aaron Clausen.
Yes.
Tina Cassidy.
Yes.
And Tom O'Rourke.
Yes.
That motion
roll.
carries. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Can I get a motion and a second to adjourn? Oh, Tegan, you have something you need to say?
Yeah, just one
Go ahead,
quick question.
Tegan.
before we adjourn. Did we decide that we needed to meet on the 2nd at this point, or was that only if we hadn't voted it out today?
That was only if we didn't vote it out today. We're all free from the second.
Okay, except for the UPWP committee, which will be at 10 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for clarifying that. Okay, Thatcher Keyser, you have a motion?
I do. Motion to adjourn.
Eric, do you want to second that motion?
I said.
Without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Good work, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.